yards for something.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The National Weather Service warns Tropical Storm Helen is bringing catastrophic rain and flooding throughout the southeast. It was a Category 4 hurricane last night on Florida's Gulf Coast. Now it's centered north of Atlanta. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell told CNN the storm's destruction is far from over.
But if you are still in the path of the storm, with the flash flooding that you're seeing in Atlanta, what we expect to see in North Carolina, I'm worried about landslides in those areas. And so there's such a variety of threats that are coming from this storm. We're hearing reports of tornadoes in certain areas. And so there's still so much that's happening across many states.
The storm has left at least 4 people dead. The National Weather Service is telling people do not travel in Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky. Forecasters say your vehicle will not protect you from the storm. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has addressed the UN General Assembly. He delayed his speech as the Israeli military attacked Hezbollah militants in Lebanon this week, and Hezbollah fired back. Israel has also continued to attack Hamas fighters in Gaza. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports Netanyahu says the conflicts are linked.
So he painted this conflict as a war against Iranian proxies who are trying, he said, to annihilate Jews. It started with Hamas attacking Israel on October 7th. A day later, Hezbollah in Lebanon then started firing rockets into northern Israel, displacing tens of thousands of Israelis. Netanyahu says his forces will continue to strike in Lebanon and will continue until the militants move back.
NPR's Michelle Kellerman reporting. Many UN delegates walked out of Netanyahu's speech, saying Israel's attacks are killing thousands of Palestinian and Lebanese civilians. Some are accusing Israel of war crimes. Stage and screen actress Maggie Smith, who played everything from wistful heroines in Shakespeare to Downton Abbey's sharp-tongued dowager countess, has died. She was 89 years old. NPR's Bob Mondello remembers Smith's career that spanned 7 decades.
When she was an ingenue, Laurence Olivier's Othello could smother her with a pillow.
What is your pleasure?
Look in my face!
By the end of her career, no one would have dared try. She was indomitable, whether as Harry Potter's Professor McGonagall or as Downton Abbey's Dowager Countess.
I can handle her.
Really? Well, if you can, you must have learned to very recently.
Smith began acting on stage and returned to it as often as her screen career allowed. In 1970, she won a Best Actress Oscar as a deluded teacher in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie and worked so constantly for the next half-century that the Dowager Countess's most famous question,
What is a weekend?
might almost have been her own. Bob Mondello, NPR News.
This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Lifespan, the company that's taking over the Morton Hospital in Taunton amid the Steward bankruptcy saga, says it's planning to close the hospital's addiction support program. Board members with the state's Health Policy Commission made Lifespan's intentions public yesterday. Julie Pinkham sits on the commission's board, and she's also serves as director of the Mass Nurses Association.
I just do want to make it clear that this has been massively disruptive for the employees. They have held firm and worked through this entire crazy situation.
Both Lifespan and Steward declined to comment. Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, is on Nantucket this weekend to participate in the annual Nantucket Project event. The Current reports that Hunter was on the island last November with the Biden family for its annual visit during the Thanksgiving holiday. The 54-year-old son of the president arrived on Nantucket from Boston on Wednesday aboard a Cape Air plane along with his family, Secret Service agents, and Mass State Police troopers. He recently pleaded guilty in a federal tax evasion case and in June was found guilty of firearms-related charges. Hunter Biden is scheduled for sentencing hearings. In both of those cases in December, he faces up to 17 years in prison. In sports, Red Sox wrap up the season this weekend with a series against the Rays at friendly Fenway. The Patriots have the 4 p.m. game on Sunday. That's against the 49ers in San Francisco. We're looking at some sun this afternoon, high in the upper 70s, cloudy in upper 50s overnight. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Leesa, a mattress brand who believes good sleep should come naturally. Lisa donates mattresses to nonprofits across the U.S. to improve their communities. Learn more at leesa.com.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Margery's off today. Andrea Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety, former Sheriff of Suffolk County, is sitting in. Andrea, it's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too, Jim.
How are you? How are you, I said. And she says...
No, I'm sorry. I just inadvertently shut
I'll
my
ask
computer
you again.
off.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Good. Okay. Well, that takes care of that. We're starting out with a question.
God, it was like a test.
And by the way, and you passed, sort of. We're starting out with a question that you'll be happy to hear is not about the Trump-Harris race. We're going to try to give you a break for a little while. By the way, giving you a break, in 30 minutes, the Music Inclusion Ensemble is going to play.
Yeah.
And I am telling you, it is so beautiful and so thrilling that you're either going to want to get on YouTube or get down here as fast as you can. But in any case, as I said, we're starting with a non-presidential election question. How much should the average person care what their neighbors have to say about the state of their lawn? If letting things get a little wild, a little overgrown for the sake of the climate, and maybe a little laziness, is that such a bad thing? That's an argument presented in the New York Times, of all places. The gist is that plant diversity helps protect native species, fostering ecosystems threatened by the shifting climate. But we also know that letting your grass run a little long can help protect insect species. So how your neighbors might feel about all this, seeing your lawn slowly get more and more overgrown with wildflowers, that's another thing entirely. Our number to call or text is 877-301-8970. Does this argument about letting things get a little wild make sense to you? Maybe you're the kind of person who appreciates a nicely manicured, tight-trimmed lawn. Would it bother you to see your neighbor's space more unruly? And have you joined the growing number of people out there who've gotten rid of their lawns entirely? You know, the rock and pebble thing, replacing unmowed lawns and weeds and that sort of stuff. Again, 877-301-8970. Your lawn and you. Describe what you got and your inspiration. So I was shocked that you were so into a lawn discussion before the show this morning, Andrea Cabral. So fill us in. What's your thing here?
I'm an enigma, Jim.
You are an enigma. Yes, that's beautifully put.
Well, I actually have been thinking about doing this with my lawn for a while. I have friends that have on their front lawn. It's a very small sort of front lawn, but everything in the front is sort of these wild flowers and these plants that are pollinators, right? They're for birds and bees. Mm-hmm. And it's really, I think, very nice, but I also think it's great for the environment. We read every single day about we're losing, if we lose bees, we're done for as a species. That we need to be doing more of that kind of stuff. And I can do a full, almost half of my backyard, I can turn into that kind of, friend to the birds and bees pollinator, but I can also do the pebble thing in the front lawn, which I actually think is better. I didn't
Why
fertilize.
Is it better?
Well, it's better for the drainage.
Oh, it is?
It's better for the stormwater runoff.
Oh.
You're not fertilizing your lawn, so the fertilizer I didn't fertilize my lawn at all this year.
Oh, very sad.
So that it doesn't go into the runoff.
Oh.
It doesn't go into the. There's lots of reasons to do it, but there are lots of companies, and I'm going to be looking up one or two, that they're aesthetically pleasing. You can do it in an aesthetically pleasing way.
Well, by the way, you should, in the spirit of full transparency, rather than preparing for the show at 10:30 this morning, you were emailing somebody. Is that not correct? I saw you emailing. Who would that be?
Well, the person that I purchased my house from is both a friend and a landscaper.
Ooh.
So I actually sent her an email asking if she does the gravel gardens or the sort of wildflower meadow kind of thing. And if she doesn't, if she knows somebody who does, because I need to stop thinking about it and actually start doing it. I mean, there are people who are good planters, who really can grow anything, like my mother was one of those people. That's great. And for people like me, hopefully you're able to find somebody who can put in the kinds of plants that are not high maintenance, and that can come and maybe tend to it.
Well, let me tell you, I have to be as transparent as you were. Our lawn until 2 days ago, this is true, it's just coincidental, was so embarrassing. People would cross the street when they got to our house. It was really horrible. Overgrown, untended, unwhatever. And then we came upon a woman who does these things, who happens to be the wife of a colleague who has worked with us. She came, and it's like a whole new day. I mean, we didn't do anything except say, can you do this, and here's the check. And I know everybody can't do that, but I have to say the satisfaction level I feel after 2 days of that is pretty great. The neighbors are making eye contact again, which is another thing. But it is true, there is almost nothing, I was trying to think, there's almost nothing that causes a neighbor, except maybe excessive noise, to look down their nose at you, I think, in my experience, because I've done it to other people, than if you have a little, our front lawn is like a postage stamp, by the way, but when it's really out of control, it's sort of a statement of disrespect for your neighbors. Is that...
To some degree, yes. I think that there's always the question of whether or not people can afford it.
Of course.
Whether or not the people who live there maybe are elderly, they can't get out and mow their own lawn, and so it kind of falls into disarray. But yeah, if it's the kind of thing where there's the capacity to take care of it, but just not the willingness to do so.
Exactly.
That does create a problem.
We did a segment months and months ago, which I was reminded about this morning. We're going to get to your calls and texts in a second at 877-301-8970. And I want to get the number right, that the percentage of total carbon emissions that comes from gas-powered lawn equipment, like blowers and that sort of thing, doubles the amount of carbon emissions from all aviation combined. It's not just your home stuff, it's industrial stuff too. But the point is that there are many things you can do with your lawn that are more environmentally friendly, and as you're suggesting, pretty as well. And there are things you can do if you're sort of half-assed about it, which I've historically been, which are horrible for the environment. And you raised our good friend Bill McKibben, and Bill McKibben's message, which is...
You can't do everything to combat the climate crisis, certainly not at the level that Bill does things every day, but you can do what you can do. And he really is, in large part, my inspiration for all of the things, the heat pump.
I agree with you.
Looking at the solar panels. I have a heat pump. Stopped using paper towels. I don't use paper for toilet paper or paper towels. It's bamboo or cloth.
It is?
Yeah, it really resonated with me when he said, "Look, it's true that it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Like I hear all these terrible things are going on. I can't fight the fossil fuel industry." And then if you take a deep breath and you calm down, you go, "Yeah, but you know what I can do? I can not use my gas stove, which I don't use anymore."
Wow.
I can, yeah.
You're incredible.
Well,
Putting us all to shame. In any case, that's Andrea Cabral sitting in for Margery. 877-301-8970. We're taking a little break from politics for the next few minutes and talking about your lawns and you. Where do you want to start, Andrea Cabral?
Well, I'm going to start with one of our texters who says that this texter knows no mow May, which is no, the word no, mow, M-O-W, May. And I'm trying to replace my current yard with clover, not with a lot of luck. The city of Long Beach, California pays people to replace their lawns with native plants and grasses. It's something for Massachusetts to consider.
Clover's the kind of thing that sort of like covers your whole thing kind of thing. Okay.
Yep, holds in moisture really well.
John in Elliott, Maine, wherever that is. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you. Hi, John.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Sure.
So in my landscape, I just have areas where, before we had weed whackers, we used to let all the margins grow up in asters and milkweed and goldenrod. And I still have a place for some lawn around my yard, but I've minimized it significantly. I build from the edges in with perennials and shrubs. And now instead of a big lawn, I have about 1/4 of the lawn that I had when I first moved to the house.
And why are you doing this to be a responsible citizen of planet Earth? I missed that part. What's the motivation, John?
Well, for me, our backyard gardens, our landscapes are one thing that we can do in a world where some days we're holding our head in our hands.
That's what Andrea said.
We're making a difference.
Good for you.
And
I agree, John.
What goes to seed in my yard goes to seed down the river. I get tens of thousands of fireflies on a summer night, tons of birds nesting in my yard. And the pollinators are all there because I leave tree canopies. So many people come in and clear cut a landscape. One tree might have 10 million flowers.
Right.
And we can only plant so many in our landscape. So in the past few years, I wrote a book called The Heirloom Gardener, really trying to give people a sense of knowing how much of an impact they can have by what they do in their own landscape.
Boy, was that
Thank
a perfect
you so
first
much.
call.
That
The
was.
Heirloom Gardener, is that what the name of the book is? Heirloom Gardener. Check it out. Hey, John, call us again. That was pretty impressive, I have to say. Do you understand what he was talking about, by the way?
I absolutely
You
do.
did?
I have a lot of trees in my backyard as well, and I don't want to get rid of any of those, but I want to make the environment more hospitable. I'm so glad that he called.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
I don't mean wow that he called, which is good, but wow you, I should say. Ann and JP, Jamaica Plain, you're on Boston Public Radio with Andrea Cabral and me, Jim Browdy. Hi.
Oh my gosh! Hi, Andrea. When are you running for president? Hi, Jim.
Oh, and she says, "Oh, hi, Jim. Sorry to disappoint you, Ann. Take it away."
So, I am definitely way pro getting rid of your grass and doing, something planted, but it is a fine line. And, there is a big issue with rats in the city of Boston, and the people across the street from us, when we could see that they were not taking care of it at all. And there eventually was a rat problem. And it was sort of the talk of the neighborhood, including the mailman even was like, what is going on over there?
Oh, no.
And I was like, buddy, I have no control over it. But they were actually, the city showed up and they were fined. And then we saw him anger mowing, 2 days later after getting...
That's a great line.
Like a multi-$100 fine.
Hey, Ann, stop for one second.
Yeah, it's a fine line.
The rat thing, I was driving home from dinner last night and I saw a big fat rat on my street and I was totally freaked out. What is the thing in an unkept lawn that attracts rats? What is it?
I don't know.
But it does.
Because, there's other people. I don't know if it's that there's trash there that we can't see.
Yeah, my guess is that there's trash.
Who have wildflowers, and that they haven't been tagged. They have not been fined by the city. So for some reason, the wildflower meadow does not attract rats, but overgrown and sort of an abandoned looking lawn does. So I don't know what the answer is.
And they may be doing their version of, fertilizing and composting, which means just putting garbage on the lawn and saying it'll biodegrade, it'll go right in. And that could be part of it too.
Hey, Ann, that was another excellent call. Zoe, who is, of course, our coworker and our rat expert, says basic nature, cover, animals to eat. People are throwing trash in their lawn. I doubt it, she said, just rats doing rat things. I guess it is. If they have cover, literally, they'll do rat things, right?
But they usually want to, cover, I guess, if they're reproducing, they do want to be able to have a place to hide their offspring. But they usually go for the food.
Okay, 877-301-8970. Until the first guy mentioned, how satisfying is a weed whacker, by the way? Is that one of the great No?
I've never done anything with a weed whacker.
Oh, my God. I mean, it's unbelievable. You just have to be careful you don't do your ankle or something. But short of that, it is one of the most, for someone who knows nothing about lawns, nor has any lawn-related skills, a weed whacker is a really satisfying item to own.
I will tell you that when I grew up, and I realize now that part of my desire to do some of this stuff is that I grew up surrounded by woods, surrounded by, this sort of wild, the very stuff that people are planting. I grew up with that all around me, but we were the weed whackers in the family. My mother had luscious gardens, roses, vegetables, fruit, but the weed pullers were her kids. So we get out there, she had us get out there, and we pulled all of the weeds. So I've never done anything with a weed whacker.
Mitch in New Bedford is speaking for me. Wildflowers? Who are we kidding? It ends up as a bunch of weeds with one daisy in the middle.
Oh, one giant sunflower, a lonely-looking sunflower.
Okay, where do you want to go next there, Andrea?
Okay, I'm going to go to Liv from Newton. She said, we killed our lawn essentially and replaced it with native plants and trees that attract butterflies and bees. We're very happy about it. So far, the only comments we've gotten from the neighbors are positive ones. This is a great way to avoid using precious resources of water and not using pesticides. So we've got to Liv from Newton, who's making it work.
A lot of people think about this. Aaron in Hopkinton text, I do a lot of native planting using electric weed whackers, but I must admit my gas rider mower is one of absolute joy. It makes me feel like a farmer for 15 minutes every couple of weeks. Marianne, you're in Franklin. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi. A year ago, I started switching over to a clover lawn. It's very easy to do. You just feed it yourself, and eventually it takes over the grass. It looks lovely. It's green. In the spring and most of the summer, it has little white flowers that the bees love, which is
that's great.
my main reason for doing it. I have a sign in my yard that says, "Going wild for the pollinators." My next-door neighbor has the most pristine, beautiful green lawn that he treats and does everything to. And I asked him if he was okay with it, that I just went clover, and he said yes. So I do it mostly for the bees, but also you don't have to mow it. It only gets to about 4 inches tall. It just spreads out over the lawn, and it looks lovely. And it's resistant to drought, resistant to pet stains.
So wait, Marianne, why isn't everybody doing clover except the experts?
I don't know. And I read an article about it, and I looked it up, and I researched it, and I don't know why everybody isn't doing it.
Well, let me tell you, that is impressive. Send us a photo. What's our email? bpr@wgbh.org. I'd love to see a picture of the clover deal. If you have a chance, send us an email.
Me too, and I think it's an absolutely great idea. There are a couple of stories in the Washington Post, one by Michael Corin, who gives advice, and one by Caitlin Hudson, who talk about the very things that Marianne was talking about, the clover, using clover, but also how putting up a sign. You know, if you're concerned that your neighbors are going to think that you just suddenly decided to give up living, you know, and you don't care, put up a sign, a meadow in progress, or this is what we're doing.
That's a nice idea.
And then there's a sign example in the story that has if you want to give out your phone number, it says, if you have any questions, call this number.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And then, but neighbors are asking them, how did you do it, and how can I do it? So that's one way to sort of spread the word. That's a Bill McKibben.
By the way, Tommy from New Hampshire has texted. He's clearly been affected by our discussion, which I'm pretty proud of. He says, that's it. I'm paving my lawn. So there you go. Tommy from, by the way, you know, we haven't talked about this. We got to take a break, but a lot of people are doing slate these days. Is that like a variation on a pebble experience?
I think you could do. Slate is thin. We used to have flagstone on our lawn.
Is that the same thing?
But they're like stepping stones. It didn't cover the whole lawn, but I don't think it's the same as the pebbles, but it's. I think you can use it for drainage. We used it for drainage.
Will you be offended if I say I'm shocked how much you know about this?
I can't believe that after knowing me for over 20 years, you're shocked by anything you learn about me.
You really know a lot about. I'm really impressed. I am really impressed. I'm not being sarcastic.
Well, I grew up kind of in the woods.
What, like in Rhode Island?
Yeah, it was we were like one of 3 houses on the street. Everything else was woods.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I grew up on the 19th floor of an apartment.
Is that true?
Well, you never know. You know what I mean?
I could be lying.
I didn't think you'd be lying, but in any case. Okay,
you want to take a break?
We do.
Okay, we're talking pollinators, gravel gardens, how you can become an environmental hero by going no further than your front or backyard. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're live from the BPL.
The Israeli military has been targeting Hezbollah, killing heads of the group with pager attacks and airstrikes in Lebanon. Hezbollah might not be the same without those leaders.
The first-class commanders who were killed have been there from the very, very beginning.
The uncertain future of Hezbollah next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I'm Jim Browdy. Margery is off. I'm joined by lawn and garden expert Andrea Cabral. She did something else before, which I can't remember. If you're just joining us, we're talking about this piece in the New York Times about how planting wildflowers in place of your lawn can help protect local ecosystems, whatever it is, use less water, have fewer carbon emissions, since, as I said, gas-powered lawnmowers are terrible, as are those leaf leaf blowers, all at the expense of keeping good favor with your neighbors, because it can lead to horrible relations. So we're asking you at 877-301-8970, text and call, your relationship with your lawn, and it sounds like there's a lot of intentionality on the part of our listeners on this, 877-301-8970. Do you have a call screen yet, or you don't?
I do. We can go to Greg from Millis.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, how are you?
We're good.
Hi, good. You can hear all right?
Perfectly.
Yep.
Hey, yeah, I wanted to make a comment on the no mow May and
Please.
I've been a landscaper for over 30 years in Eastern Mass here,
wow.
and deer ticks are a big problem in Lyme disease. And one of the things I tell my customers about the mowing is it's important to do frequent mowing on your lawn because ticks tend to not be in areas that are disturbed. They tend to be in more wooded areas, and mowing is one way to at least keep them a bit away from the house, and cleaning the leaves up in the fall and taking care of the beds, your beds around your house with mulching and whatnot. At least as far as ticks go, I think it's an important step.
Hey, Greg, can we move on?
With that.
The ticks advice is excellent, and thank you. Tell us, as an expert, what's the easiest, prettiest, most environmentally friendly combo that we mere mortals could embrace on our lawns?
Well, I think there's a lot of if you're planting grass, grass is meant to be mowed. So
that's too bad.
If you're not going to mow it, turning into wildflower areas is not a terrible idea. Clover, actually, I've done some clover lawns lately.
And?
Over the past few years, that's been more popular.
Oh.
It's a little tricky to get it established because weeds grow up around it. It's not just clover. So you end up fighting, and if you want all clover, it can be really tricky because you can't really treat the lawn for weeds because clover is basically considered a weed as far as grass, on your lawn.
Meaning that weed killer will kill the clover too?
Well, yeah, it can. Yeah, there's some special products that you can use that, but that's the one issue. So you have to go basically chemical free, which can be tricky if you want to have a decent lawn because the clover can get taken over by other weeds. Depending on your lawn, everybody's lawn's going to be different.
So one more time, the simplest, environmentally friendly thing a mere mortal who doesn't have your expertise or Andrea's can do. What is it?
I think you can do all of the proper maintenance correctly. Make sure you're watering correctly, and to have a good lawn, and you can still mow frequently. You can use the electric mowers. We have some electric products that we use. And I think just try to do the general maintenance, keeping it neat, I think, with leaf cleanups and all these things. I do think it's important because it's part of the overall care and maintenance of
Hey, Greg, what's the name of your business? You sound like such a decent guy. I hope that's true. What's the name of your business?
Thank you. LDI Lawn and Tree. We're out of Millis.
Great. It's wonderful to talk to you, Greg. Thanks for your call. I mean, he sounded like he knew what he was talking about, right?
He absolutely did, but you better hope tomorrow's headline is that Greg the landscaper was accused of being a serial killer. I'm sure he's not. I actually may call Greg the landscaper.
I think you should. LDI
he could do the
or
clover
whatever
thing
it was.
for me.
Exactly. Well, he said clover's a problem, though. He said because of the weed thing, and yet...
And the people who have done those kinds of lawns will go out and weed it themselves, like they pick the weeds themselves so they stay on top of the maintenance.
Oh.
I would need somebody to weed it for me because
fine.
I'm really not going to do that kind of stuff.
Good. Okay.
All right.
Let's go to TR in
Waltham.
Yeah. Waltham's famous for its lawns, from what I recall. Go ahead, TR. What's up?
Hey there.
Hey you.
I did this years ago. I don't like mowing, and I realized this was my first house, and I just said, the heck with that. I'm not going to mow. And I turned it into front and backyard, all landscaping, but not with the sort of mindful, worldly, kumbaya thing going on. I just did it. So, but what that does, as people will tell you, is then you have to open the Museum of Fine Weeds, which some have discussed, and as an older person now, I do need a lot of help with it. But one thing people haven't mentioned is other ground covers.
What does that mean?
There are many, many types of thyme, Thyme.
Oh, yeah.
Like the spice?
Yeah.
Like the herb or whatever that is?
And they're wonderful. They flower.
Wow.
The herb. I'm not sure all of them are great for cooking, but a lot of them are very low growing. There's one called Ajuga, Aguga.
Thank you.
Or AJ, something like
Whatever.
that. And there are many different varieties, and again, gorgeous flowers in the spring.
Hey, TR, I love cilantro. Could I have like a cilantro lawn or no?
If you want to, it's a free world.
Okay,
I
that's
hate
a very
cilantro, so.
well. No, there's a divide. Some people hate cilantro.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Some love it.
And your neighbors just started liking you again. You really
Are
want
you
to do
in the group of
cilantro
people
thing?
who taste like soap?
I don't like it.
TR, thank you.
Yeah, not at all.
I could eat
Thank
cilantro.
You,
TR, that was excellent too. Another excellent set of suggestions. You got something over there or what?
Yeah.
What is it?
One of our texters, anonymous texter, says, I live across the street from a yard freak who owns a landscaping business. I have clover and crabgrass, and I've never fertilized. My garden has perennials. They survive without any extra watering all summer. My neighbor probably pulls her hair out, but it's my yard, and I don't care.
Wow.
That's right. She's sounding a defiant note on behalf of the overgrown lawn.
So we have someone calling who's going to represent the no mowing movement.
Okay.
And I believe Jesse in Bedford, that's you,
Hi,
correct?
Jesse.
Hello, how are you?
I think we're good. Thank you for asking. What's up?
Well, I am huge no-mow, not just in May, all year long if possible.
Excellent.
There is one day I do a path around the outside of my lawn and straight through. I've got about 1.5 acres in the back, but it's beautiful. I've got butterflies and praying mantis and so many different types of bees. When I walk outside, I'm in a peaceful, happy environment. All the homes around me, on the other hand, have their weekly haircut, if you will, whether they need it or not. There's fertilizer, there's gas-powered mowing, there's gas-powered leaf blowers going on at any time of the day. And it's the last guy, the gentleman who called, who's the landscaper,
yeah, that guy.
He's a proponent of mowing. I mean, I wanted to reach into the radio and do some bad things to the guy. But, you know, plant native plants. Mow once a month, not every freaking week when you just don't need it.
Wow.
I could go on for days.
Well, I'm sure you could.
Oh, wow.
That was beautiful, though. That was really quite a response. Thank you, Jesse.
I think, but Jesse kind of has a point. I mean, in one of the stories that I mentioned that's in the Globes, there's a quote in there by someone who says, we treat land as a commodity because we think it belongs to us. Our concept of sharing the land or giving back to the land doesn't enter into it because we think we own it. I'd say with the notable exception of Native Americans who generally don't believe that. But it's true.
So are you sharing your, like if I come over with friends for a picnic and just camp out, are you good with that?
Well, I would share it. I'm not sure if you come over, I would share it, but I would share.
Yeah, this whole thing about it's all everybody's. I mean, people, that's just not, I mean, it isn't. You know?
No, you have to be careful. You have to
Blocking
stay
access
safe.
to the beach is one thing. That is abhorrent. You have your little lawn, you have your little lawn.
Right,
You know what I mean?
Right. And you should be making sure that bees and insects and even little tiny animals have, you know, can share in it too.
So did you find the segment fulfilling,
I
considering
found the segment
your
fulfilling.
desires?
I think our callers and our texters did. We got a huge response to it. I think it was great.
Okay, you know what's coming up?
I'm going to tell you.
I hope you will.
Because this is all the time we have for this segment,
That is
unfortunately.
correct.
We are doing live music, as we always do, Live Music Friday here after a quick break. There's a showcase tonight at Berklee's Sully Hall. We're going to talk to Adrian Anantawan and players from the Music Inclusion Ensemble who are absolutely fabulous. You've got to hear this. Live Music Friday is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, are you ready to gear up with your night vision goggles, GPS, and industrial-strength bug spray to find buried treasure in the woods of New England? A real-life treasure hunt created by gaming designers is underway, and a $25,000 prize could be yours. Plus, Saturday Night Live at 50. Does it still feel alive as a cultural touchstone? That and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you and Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And Newport Mansions, offering tours of the third-floor residence of the Breakers Mansion for the first time in 130 years. Visitors will witness preservation work in action on this guide-led experience. Tickets and info at newportmansions.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrea Cabral is sitting in for Margery. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tonight, 8 p.m. at Berklee's Sully Hall, violinist Adrian Anantawan, who's been on our show quite a few times, and players from the Music Inclusion Ensemble will return for a free concert kicking off the start of their fall season. We'll give you the website in a minute to get information. We spoke to these people a few months ago. They're a collective of musicians with varying disabilities, not just playing together, but also innovating together, creating new sounds, new styles of performing, not dissimilar to Yo-Yo Ma's legendary Silk Road Ensemble. Returning for tonight's concert, Minnesota-based violinist and songwriter Gaelynn Lea, who's also been here, hot off an appearance in the closing ceremony for the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games. Gaelynn is also the winner of the 2016 NPR Tiny Desk concert. She's performed with bands like Wilco and the Decemberists and co-founded the disabled artist advocacy group called Ramped. In a few minutes, we'll speak with Gaelynn, with Adrian, with newcomer Julia LeGrand, but right now, they're going to kick us off with a spectacular rendition of Clean Bandit's Symphony.
You ready, Connor? Ready, Connor?
Music Inclusion Ensemble playing symphony. Adrian's going to join us. Gaelynn's going to join us. Julia has joined us in just a second. When Adrian joins us in a minute, he's going to introduce all the players who were just, that was so full of life and spectacular. Unbelievable. Welcome to all three of you. It's great to see two of you again. And Julia, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It really was. Could we just stop the show and play for the rest of the day?
Right.
That would be fabulous. Okay. So I watched Gaelynn's Tiny Desk. And just so that you guys know, before you all got here, Jim and I were lamenting the fact that we are singular in our families as being musically completely untalented, which is why we sort of love watching people who are talented in this stuff. But I was watching Gaelynn's Tiny Desk concert, which was fabulous. And I said to Jim, you know, when you watch her play, you get glimpses of her soul. And I started thinking about the word instrument and how we just we take it for granted. So instruments, by their definition, are meant to be adapted to the people who are using them. And I want you to talk a little bit about that in terms of what you're trying to do with the Inclusion Ensemble and what you're trying to do in terms of fostering the careers of other disabled performers, how they view the instrument, how you teach them to view the instrument.
Absolutely. So we think about an instrument, for instance, like the violin, as an assistive tool in a way. We created this to not only extend the range of the human voice, but as you were saying, it extends the range of the human heart and soul. So when we think about these very traditional instruments, we also have to think about the ways that we can modify them to suit our needs too. And everyone's bodies are different. Sometimes our minds or sensory perceptions work in different ways. And music is always an act of creativity and innovation. And when we're centering the disability identity in particular, this really makes this music process as pure as can be, because we have incredible musicians here.
Can you introduce them, actually? Do you mind doing that?
Yeah, so we have Sriram here on piano.
Hey, Sriram.
Hi.
Kapono on ukulele, Connor on viola, Adam on cello, and Zainab on violin here. Yes.
So, Gaelynn, it's great to see you again, by the way.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be back.
And you're going to be playing in a minute, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You were not part of that first deal. We asked you last time, but for those who weren't listening when you were here, tell us what RAMPed is, this organization that you're essentially behind.
RAMPed is a kind of a global network of disabled musicians, not people who are out there, you know, trying to make a living doing music, because although there are a lot of really wonderful disability music-related organizations, there wasn't really anything geared towards people who are trying to go out and do it professionally. So we were like, well, that's a need. And it's been really wonderful to be able to not just raise awareness about the fact that there are a lot of us out here, you know, I mean, people behind me here, and Adrian and Julia, and then just like so many others. But not only that, but we get to meet each other, and so it's a less isolating experience being able to work together.
Before we bring Julia into this conversation, how thrilling was, I mean, you've done some huge things, as we've discussed. How thrilling was it to be in the closing ceremony of the Paralympics games?
It was awesome.
That was unbelievable.
Yeah, I was so grateful. Like, it was a very big surprise. They called me like a week before they filmed the
And you had to fly out to LA to do this?
Yep, out to LA and meet some other really cool disabled artists, and just I love watching the Olympics. Every time they're on, I'm watching all of them, and the Paralympics as well, and so it was just really neat to be involved.
I didn't know you were in it until I was watching it, which was pretty thrilling, by the way.
Yeah, it was a secret.
That was pretty great. Julia, how'd you get involved in all this in the ensemble?
Yeah, well, I have so enjoyed my time in the ensemble thus far, and I really was connected to it through Adrian, who I met 3 or so years ago when he actually came and performed with the orchestra in my hometown. I'm from Michigan, and when he came to perform, my teacher at the time connected us, and Adrian has been an incredible mentor to me thus far. I think it, like Gaelynn was saying, it can feel isolating to be pursuing a career in music as a disabled person, and so connecting with a mentor like Adrian was an incredible first step for me, I think, to really claim and figure out how I wanted to embrace my disability identity as a musician. And he also helped bring me into this ensemble, which has really opened that up on a whole new level. I mean, I think having mentors is really excellent, but it's also just important to be surrounded by peers and to work and play with other students who are at a similar place in their careers as I am, trying to combine school and performance and disability in a way that it's not always easy to find examples of. And so being part of this community has been incredible for that reason. And so I really appreciate the community aspect of it.
Adrian, I'd like you to talk about a couple of things. First, the changes that you see in the people that you mentor as they come into their own and understanding how they can embrace their gift in music. But second, the advocacy piece, and hopefully Gaelynn can talk about this as well, about the venues. It's not just about adapting the instruments, but that you're going to venues that are not readily accessible, and you're having to be in concert places where they're not thinking it. The media doesn't think about it when they cover these kinds of things. Can you talk to those two things?
I think about disability as a universal human experience. All of us will acquire a disability through old age or have friends, family who also have disabilities. So when we think about inaccessible spaces, we're not only limiting people with disabilities or artists with disabilities to be able to share their stories with the wider public, but all of us in the end. And I think that being able to use music as a tool of advocacy is the first step to be able to start shifting minds and attitudes, because that's where it begins first. It comes from the heart. And then hopefully we can come together, as Julia was saying, as a community to be able to support this work, not only for us, but for everyone. That's why we call it the Music Inclusion Ensemble, not the Music Disability Ensemble.
Gaelynn, when you do respond to Andrea's question, Julia, I think you used the word, it's isolating. You've been around longer at this than Julia has. Is it less isolating today than it was when you started in the business?
I do think we're seeing changes. I think we're at the beginning of a turn towards more inclusive spaces, but the accessibility piece is still a really huge barrier. And what people don't really think about, and venue owners especially, if anyone here is listening and owns a venue, the truth is, yes, I can play a show in a space that's less than ideal, but you're asking a disabled artist to go through the experience of the frustration of not being accounted for and then still give a good performance. You're asking a lot more from disabled artists.
Such a good point.
And it's same with any other kind of marginalization, but in my case, it's physical barriers, right? And so just recognizing that as a human, when you want to be welcoming and inclusive and diverse, it really does have to think about the physical aspects for people, and also the way that we welcome audiences. Not everybody can sit quietly through a whole show, and just recognize that there are diverse audiences too is just a really important piece of not I don't want to use the word traumatizing, but there is some level of not having care and expecting the disabled person to have to always go above and beyond and dig deep to still give a good show, and that's not a really healthy way to do music. And so we don't like that for other groups, so we should also be considering disability in that equation, right, of making welcoming spaces.
That's the voice of Gaelynn Lea. Adrian Anantawan is here, Julia LeGrand as well. Julia, did I read a story in which you're quoted, Andrea touched on this, saying the media, these aren't your exact words, but the media doesn't get it either? I think you said something like that. Feel free.
Yeah.
How do we not get it?
I think, and like Gaelynn was saying, I think there's sort of the beginning of a turn. I think, media is definitely portraying disability better and better. But I do think there can sometimes be a tendency to focus on the differences involved in disability over the similarities, and not in a way that celebrates those differences. I think there can be a tendency towards, pitying the differences, or feeling overly inspired by the overcoming of those differences. And even the word overcoming assumes just a really negative connotation. And while there are aspects of disability that require workarounds, a lot of the workarounds are having to do with how the disabled person sort of meets the built world and the social world. And so understanding disability as a really generative space of difference and the source of exciting adaptations is I just think a perspective that maybe doesn't always get highlighted. And along with that, I think it's also important to remember the similarities between able-bodied and disabled people. And as Adrian was talking about, the fact that this is the disability, this is the music inclusion ensemble and not the disability music ensemble, really being mindful of the universal. And I think music is such a great example of that. Even in this ensemble, what is connecting all of us is music, and it is truly such a universal language, as much as that is a cliche, focusing on our unique human capacity to connect and to make art and to communicate in some form or other. And that is really at the heart of being human, and that is not lost at all in disability. That is only, maybe expressed differently, but it is still central.
That's almost as good as the music, I should
Right.
say.
No,
Speaking
that
of
was
the music,
perfectly said.
can you tell us what's happening at Sully Hall tonight? And again, Andrea will give out the website a couple of times for people to get information, tickets, etc. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, we'll be playing a free concert at Berklee, Sully Hall. That's at 8 Fenway. And we're going to have a mix of classical, pop, folk music, and really just celebrate, again, diversity, differences, disability, and that intersection of arts. It's going to be a very exciting show.
Look at the look. You should see the look on Andrea's
No,
face.
I'm just thrilled. I'm thrilled that I was able to co-host today because I'm just very glad that I was here to hear all of this.
Because you guys can really play.
Because you can really play.
You two, if you could gently put your headsets down, because
Yes.
you're going to join. Gaelynn, what are you up to these days?
Right now, I am finishing a memoir. I'm releasing a memoir in about a year, and so trying to get the last 4 chapters written. And then, releasing the Macbeth. We talked about Macbeth last time.
Tell people for 30 seconds what you did with Daniel.
It's amazing.
Go ahead.
What I did with Daniel Craig. I composed the music for Macbeth on Broadway, which starred Daniel Craig and Ruth Negga, and that is a soundtrack that'll be released in around May of 2025. So kind of getting that finalized and ready to go. I'm really excited to release that music finally after a couple of years.
And you just got a $50,000 grant.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I was nominated for a Disability Futures Fellowship through the Ford Foundation and the Mellon Foundation. And I'm just really grateful that it recognizes disabled creatives amplifying disability voices and stuff like what Adrian's doing. Just really excited to be able to keep doing that kind of work.
I think you got to do a few more things to fill up your time.
I don't think
there.
you're busy enough nearly.
Tell us what you're playing, Gaelynn.
Today we are playing a song that I wrote called Bird Song. And it's sort of about how no matter what happens to your body, your spirit is always free.
Music Inclusion Ensemble playing Birdsong.
smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Braude and Margery Egan on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Cambridge Savings Bank, where they're committed to your financial well-being and community is at the core of everything they do. Cambridge Savings Bank. Always you. More at cambridgesavings.com, member FDIC. From empires to lesser-known stories, actor John Leguizamo highlights Latino and Latina heroes and their contributions throughout history. Catch Voces, American Historia, the untold history of Latinos, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
I'm Nightside News anchor Mary Blake, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
PL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is in court this hour. He's being arraigned on bribery and fraud charges. Adams denies wrongdoing. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says she's weighing her options as she tries to maintain the confidence of New Yorkers.
I will be deliberative, I'll be thoughtful, but we're going to come to the right resolution on what to do in this moment. I want to reassure them that this is important to me, it's important to them, but their best interests are what drives me every single day.
Hochul has not asked Adams to resign, but she says she expects the mayor to take the next few days to find an appropriate path forward. Well, the death toll is rising from what was Hurricane Helene after making landfall last night on Florida's Gulf Coast. Helene, which is now a tropical storm, has dropped enormous amounts of rain and caused significant flooding up through Georgia and the Carolinas. Here's Georgia Governor Brian Kemp.
This has been a deadly storm. We've had 11 confirmed fatalities. I would ask all Georgians, like the Kemp family's doing, to keep these folks and these communities in your thoughts and prayers. We know that one of those was a first responder.
Millions of people in multiple states have lost electricity since the storm struck Florida's Big Bend region as a Category 4 hurricane. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is defending his government's offensive strikes targeting Hezbollah and Hamas, rivals north and west of Israel's borders. In his address to the UN General Assembly this morning, Netanyahu said that since Hamas's October 7th attacks, Iran organized 6 more war fronts against Israel. He also warned that Iran's still working to weaponize its nuclear program.
Responsible governments should not only support Israel in rolling back Iran's aggression, they should join Israel. They should join Israel in stopping Iran's nuclear weapons program.
But world leaders are still expressing alarm over the mounting loss of civilian lives from the Israeli military's expanded air campaign in Lebanon and Gaza. Former President Donald Trump will be campaigning in Michigan today, one of the key swing states in the November election. Member station WDET Quinn Kleinfelter reports.
Trump cast doubt on the votes counted by Detroit officials in 2020 as part of his disproven narrative of widespread fraud. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson says voters can now track online when absentee ballots are accepted.
A lot of what we saw in 2020 is when there's a vacuum of trusted information out there that then allows that blank slate to be filled with misinformation.
Trump plans a town hall to again argue he'll save auto jobs, in part by levying huge tariffs on some foreign imports. Vice President Harris responded in a statement that Trump's vows are, quote, a risk auto workers cannot afford. For NPR News, I'm Quinn Kleinfelter in Detroit.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 323 points, or roughly 0.75%. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey has seized St. Elizabeth Medical Center in Brighton by way of eminent domain. NBC 10 reports that the move is an effort to keep the Stewart Healthcare property open for patients. Governor says the plan is to move operations of the hospital to Boston Medical Center, and it comes despite opposition from Apollo. That's the group that owns the land that St. E's sits on. Apollo officials claim the state lowballed them in an offer to buy the property. Of course, this is all happening as the state attempts to manage the Stewart Healthcare bankruptcy. Workers with the Massachusetts Red Cross are traveling today to areas pummeled by Hurricane Helene. Communications Director Kelly Eisner says hundreds of volunteers from all over the country are lending a helping hand.
The Red Cross in Florida are the first responders, but the storm is bigger than any one Red Cross, so we send in people from all over the country to be able to help with large-scale shelters, feeding operations, things like that.
Some 41st responders from Massachusetts Task Force 1 were also deployed to the region yesterday. The hurricane is impacting travel at Logan Airport, where dozens of flights were canceled as of this morning, and up to 100 more were delayed. Helene made landfall last night. It's now a tropical storm. Around here, we're looking at a sunny day today, high in the upper 70s. We are at 73 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
Welcome back to Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude is me. Andrea Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety, Sheriff of Suffolk County, is sitting in for Margery. We're live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Before we move to the next segment, I want to repeat the website if you want to go to the concert of that incredible music inclusion ensemble. It's, as Andrea said, Boston Conservatory .Berklee, which I assume you know ends with 2 E's, .edu. 50 years ago this month, as you all know, Boston native, well, you don't know about her, but you know about what happened, native Leola Hampton was one of the 18,000 kids bussed around the city, part of a court-mandated effort towards school desegregation. Leola's story, along with that of her sister Linda and her daughter Maya, who will join us in a second, is part of a new terrific documentary from the GBH Newsroom. It's called Never Cried, Boston's Busing Legacy. Here's just some of the sound of her from that documentary.
Sometimes when I go to sleep at night and I close my eyes, I can just envision it. Coming up the hill, getting out, going inside. Me and my sister never talked about it. I never said, Leola, how do you feel? And she never asked me how I felt about it. We just moved on with our lives until now.
That's the voice of Linda, as I said, Leola's sister. GBH is partnering with the Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative on 3 events Saturday, that's tomorrow, marking the 50th anniversary of busing in Boston at the BPL's, Boston Public Library's Rabb Hall. You go to bostondesegregation.org/events. Leola will talk about it a little bit more in a minute, too. Learn more and register for free. If you want to watch the documentary, GBH's documentary, and you should, you can find it on the GBH YouTube channel. We're joined now by Leola Hampton alongside her daughter, Maya Scott. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.
Hello, Leola and Maya. Let me just say, first of all, I watched the documentary, and you know I felt it. When you, in particular, though, when you said, almost with the same sort of sense of wonderment that a 14-year-old might have feeling this, I was truly hated. You said, I was truly hated. Mm-hmm. And all I could think about was the number of times that you're initially traumatized, then you're re-traumatized by thinking about it, all the reasons why you push it aside. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to be part of this documentary?
I thought
and not push it aside, so to have it come to the fore.
Exactly. I thought it was extremely important to tell the story of those 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. You know, I could always just take my trauma and find a resting place, but our story deserves to be told. Someone needs to understand, to be that young and to deal with that level of violence and hate, you get to this place where you're thrust into adulthood. There's this thing called adultification that happens to black children when they are put into situations that mainly adults should be able to handle. But you're in this situation, it changes you forever. My goal is to make sure that this story is told so that no other child ever will have to go through a situation like that.
Leola, why, but a variation on Andrea's question, your sister, we just heard her say, the two of you who experienced together didn't talk about it for 50 years. Why did you decide now was the time to do this?
Well, my sister actually, she went into education. She taught for 35 years.
In the same school system that brought us busing.
And the interesting part is that she was in the 11th grade, I was in the 9th grade. 2 years makes a huge difference as far as maturity is concerned. I internalized things in a way, whereas she was able to, with a little bit more of adulting, can understand some things that were happening. So we both thought that as we move forward, and she's always very interested in the development of children, this is the story that needs to be told, because we're still in a situation in this country where books are being banned and the story of African American people are being left behind. And I think when that happens, we continue the process of segregation and racism. Those children that are learning right now will grow up to be policymakers and won't have any information as to what other people contributed to this country.
But you had information, Maya, and your source is standing right there to your left. What'd your mother tell you about what she and her sister and thousands of others experienced when you were growing up?
Younger, like when we were younger, it was just a lot of like us knowing that that was an area she liked to go to, like, and we knew like basically,
You mean South Boston?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We knew basically why she didn't want to go, that it was a terrible experience. But I think the older we got, the more bits and pieces we got of the story, and then you kind of get more information. But I used to go to South Boston to play basketball games and stuff like that, and so it's just very interesting to be in that environment years later and it be very different, but also have this like air of what happened.
Leola, there's the way sort of the individual trauma is dealt with, as you've explained it, the way you and your sister dealt with it, but there's the sort of larger historical of how we deal with it as a race. And we're expected to get over it every time an unarmed black man is shot by the police or someone else. We talk about it in the moment, and then we get over it, and then we find ourselves talking about it again because it's going to happen again, in part because we got over it the first time. Can you talk a little bit about what you hope this documentary and you speaking out does for the more historical aspects of not getting over it and demanding that your history be paid attention to?
Right, and like you said, you think you get over it. You kind of
you
put it in a little compartment and say, okay, you know, I've watched generations before me do that. So that is that learned behavior. But for me, like you said, generations later, the ability to have resources, that means that you're cared for. And I think in telling this story, children that deal with not just racism, but just as the group that was here earlier, disabilities, that people will begin to have empathy and understanding, because when you're not exposed to the diversity of our world, you live in this contained box and you kind of shun them away, and you live your life assuming and thinking that the stereotypes of what these people are all about. And my goal is to, expose that.
You know, you say so many things in this film that are incredible. Even when you talk about, I think you're going for a physical because you're on your way to college after high school, and the doctor says you have high blood pressure. And you say, I have high blood pressure, and you're grinding your teeth, and now we know why. You go to Tennessee, you go to California, you go to Georgia, and your line, which is a showstopper, you learn you can't outrun racism. Right. And when you went to those places, when you tried to get away from it in this place in Boston, what was that like? What was that like?
Well, it goes back to my parents. My mother, who was born and raised in the Jim Crow South, she thought she could outrun that, and we ran right into it here in Boston. But for me, the trauma was so great. I just remember if I could just get out of Boston, I could, you know.
went back south.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, and that's the key. You can't outrun it. And it's because as a nation, we've never really addressed it. We've never had the hard conversations to say, you can't talk about 1974 without going back to, 1950, 18, the Emancipation Proclamation. You got to talk about black codes and things like that set the tone for a lot of the things that we experience today.
Well, in Boston, one of the professors who's quoted in this thing says, and I'm paraphrasing, we in Boston like to talk about how horrible it was in Little Rock or some faraway place so we can deflect the discussion away from what happened right in our hometown that still obviously isn't fixed. Have you lived your life differently because of what your mother and your aunt went through?
I would say yes, but probably not very consciously.
Well, how about there's a kid in this film who happens to be yours,
Yes.
who steals the show, little Tyson.
Yeah.
What's his schooling situation going to be? And is it in any way a function of what happened 50 years? Well, tell us.
So Tyson goes to Page Academy, and it's this school that was started 60 years ago by this black couple. And a lot of their principles are surrounded by like Kwanzaa principles, unity, like self-love, all of that. And a lot of the instructors or the teachers there are black or of color. And it was very important for me to put him in an environment, especially that young, where he can see people who looks like him. Like his teacher is a black male, and there's so many people who go their entire life without having a teacher that's a black male. So for him to start that way, I'm like really excited. Hopefully I can give him a great foundation. And I haven't really decided like BPS, like I don't really believe in private schools. So it's a very interesting thing to navigate. But hopefully.
He's 3, right?
He's 3.
3, right.
Yeah. Mom has made it better.
Yeah, I just remind Maya that, public schools are what you put into them. And what happened back in 1974 was a result of Ruth Babson taking a look at the school system and how deplorable it was and how egregious the Boston School Committee was in their efforts to say, these children are devalued, these children we don't care about, so we will take these funds and we will put them elsewhere. And, I'm here to say, you tried to deny me, but you were not successful. Of course, I don't have like a ton of different acclimates, but my success is not predicated on anyone else's terms.
And how much of that do you think when they were trying to, I might be wrong about this. I didn't grow up here. I grew up in East Providence, Rhode Island. As I learned about Arthur Garrity's decision and what he was trying to do, my feeling about it was that he was well-intentioned but uninformed, and that they were confusing the deserved resources with proximity to white students. Like that idea that what you want to do is be next to white people versus I would just like to have a decent education. Could we? Right. When you look back on all of that, you were not the target, but you suffered through a decision that you probably saw differently as a young person. How do you see it now as a grown-up?
I definitely see it different. There were viable options that were presented. Mel King said that all you have to do is put the resources in these schools. That's all they had to do. But I don't think they cared about poor white people or black people. Right. So a decision was made, just a careless decision. The Boston Public School Committee was sued. They were found guilty. So there was a rush to correct what they did. And as a result, me and those thousands of other students were in the fallout, as well as, the children from the town of South Boston. They dropped out of school because, there was a successful campaign by Louise Day Hicks to paint us in this negative. Right. But it wasn't just her. That started long time ago with, the Dred Scott case and every other effort to discredit the humanity of black people. And unfortunately, in South Boston, they believed it.
But
And
they don't talk about how bad, how they weren't well off either after.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
They
saying?
suffered greatly.
People
They suffered
left
greatly.
school, couldn't afford private schools. People were on
Yeah.
drugs. People, we speak about, Black people and how we suffered through it, but they suffered through it as well because at the root of it, it's about money.
It's about
Always.
money. And what we've learned is that we have to have empathy for each other.
And people with money keeping the people who don't have it fighting amongst themselves so they get to keep that money.
Convoluting the issue.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's how the
there
Klan
should-
was born. The Klan was born. Poor white people and newly emancipated blacks had more in common than rich people and white people, but the Klan worked because you could set them against one another, and it worked, and it still works.
Leola, amidst all the violence and hate in this film and in this history, you tell a story near the end of the film about how no one makes better lasagna than you do. Can you explain why you were a lasagna expert, if you would share that with people?
Yeah. In the midst of all of that chaos and violence, we had a home economics teacher who, as I write in my story, she just saw us as to what we were, children. And she took us and we had conversations. She was Italian, so she taught us how to make lasagna, spumoni, I even made marmalade. I'm like, what is that? But that's what education should be, an exposure to the things that you aren't aware of. So, what I want in education is to expose kids to our culture, to collard greens and black-eyed peas and also lasagna. And that's what humanity is all about.
Is her lasagna as good as she says it is, or is she bragging?
It's really good. She loves anything with red sauce.
I do.
It gives me heart.
I believe there's a small Italian woman inside.
Maya, there's an absolutely precious scene in the film. You're sitting with Tyson, and you're doing the he's finding where his he knows where everything is, but he's pointing it out to you. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, that little boy embodies, all of her hope. What are you going to tell him about his grandmother's experience, and how are you going to let that inform him as he gets his education?
Specifics, I probably will give him as much as he asks for as we move through and he learns more.
And I'll give him the rest when he gets older enough to handle it.
I'm sure you will.
Can you repeat the last question?
And how are you going to let it inform the kind of education he gets?
So I'm really big. My dad would say all the time, if you want to learn, you can learn anywhere. And just making sure that Tyson is interested in learning and being a sponge. I think that it's not going to be about where I put him. It's going to be about his mindset, about what he wants for himself. So just making sure that Tyson has a strong foundation in learning and knowing that he's smart and knowing that he's capable. I think a lot of kids come up and that part of them has been broken, especially kids of color. You're told that you're not smart or you're not being able to get this or, and people want to move at a speed that maybe you're not ready for. And just really supporting him at home and understanding what he needs, and if he needs help, being able to be in a position to provide him that. And thankfully having parents like Leola and Ricky Scott that have put me in a position where I'm able to provide for him and give him those resources that some people aren't able to provide.
Leola, could you tell us what, I mentioned in the introduction that tomorrow this Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative is sponsoring 3 events. Could you give us a sense of what's going to happen, and then Andrea will give the website again.
Okay, so there'll be this forum tomorrow. There'll be 2 separate programs. I'm in the first program, and basically we are really taking a deep dive into the legacy of desegregation, its successes and its failures. And we're going to hear from so many different levels. I will be speaking from a student's perspective. There will be Ira, who was the chief of staff to the mayor at that time. And you will have teachers, you will have politicians, the lawyers that were involved in the lawsuit. So everyone will get the opportunity to really get a clear understanding of what happened and what was the fallout and where are we going forward from this place?
Great.
Right.
It's wonderful to meet you both. The film is really important and spectacular. Thanks for your time.
Thank you
today.
both. Can I just add that me and my sister, what we're doing moving forward is, she's created this, it's called Subi's World. And I've actually, going to surprise her, I finished the children's book, which is about two sisters that are dealing or faced with adversity, and they go into this place called Subi's World where they get to see and understand that differences are actually beautiful.
When's the book happening?
Good job, Mom. I'm just about done.
So you'll come back when the book's published. We'd love to talk to you about it.
Okay.
That's
Please
fabulous.
do. Yeah, so 2 books I'm working on.
And say hi to your sister, too.
I sure will.
Really,
I sure will.
Thank you both for being
Good
here.
to meet you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Boston resident and student during the busing crisis, Leola Hampton, and her daughter, Maya Scott. They're featured in a great new documentary from the GBH newsroom called Never Cried, Boston's Busing Legacy. You can find it at youtube.com/GBH News. GBH is partnering with the Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative on 3 events marking the 50th anniversary of busing in Boston, taking place at the Copley BPL's Rab Hall tomorrow, which is Saturday. Go to bostondesegregation.org/events to learn more and to register for free. After a quick break, we'll talk with Boston Medical Center's Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, Vice Presidential nominees J.D. Vance and Tim Walz face off on Tuesday night, while 3 states are already voting. And can anyone beat Elizabeth Warren? Breaking down election 2024, local and national politics with the Mass Politics Profs. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And We Clean Heat Pumps, offering professional cleaning and maintenance of ductless mini-split heat pumps in homes and businesses as we head into fall. More at WeCleanHeatPumps.com. And Mass General Brigham, dedicated to building a world-class center of cancer care. With the most cancer surgeries and specialists in New England, they're committed to being with patients for every twist and turn. Learn more at massgeneralbrigham.org/cancer.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrea Cabral sitting in for Margery. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now at the desk by Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. Dr. Gergen Barnett is Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School. Doctor, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
You will be pleased to know that both Jim and I have gotten the latest COVID boosters. I think
Very
Ann,
proud of
I've gotten
you.
the flu vaccine
So
too.
have
you gotten them?
I. So
I
have
was.
I.
I'm always one of the first people there. I grew up believing in them. They were. I don't know what has happened in this country that people aren't doing it.
Well, we can talk quite a bit about that.
Yes, let's talk about that,
Yes.
and let's also talk about the latest development in flu vaccine, the nasal flu vaccine.
Absolutely.
Tell us what's going on with that. When did it get approved, and how soon can we get it in our own homes or doctor's offices?
Terrific. So you are right. We are in flu season. So for those of you who are listening or those of you who are here, we really recommend getting your flu vaccine in September, October. And I know we'll talk more about that. So one of the things that you're probably reading more about right now is, as you discussed, this flu mist. So it is a nasal spray. We've actually had it in doctor's offices for a number of years, but the FDA just approved getting to have it shipped to your home. The thing that is important for everybody to remember is that this will not happen until next flu season. So don't get worried if you're not getting your flu mist, but essentially it's going to be good for folks from 2 up to about 59, and you need to remember that 2 to 17-year-olds should have it administered to themselves, and that other folks can administer to themselves, and it's actually seen just as good as the vaccine. So that is great news, and my hope is that it will improve the equity of what we're doing in terms of our vaccines. We know it's hard to get in. We know it's hard for people to take time off work. We know that especially it's hard to get kids out of school. And so,
do you need a prescription for the?
You
for the
need
next?
a prescription,
Oh, okay.
and you will get a prescription, and then you can get it sent to your home. And so my imagination is that it will be, similar to Paxlovid in terms of being able to call in, get the prescription, get it sent to your home, and it should be pretty low barrier, but don't expect to see it until next year.
Paxlovid is the thing you take if you've got COVID,
Yes,
and it tastes like you're licking a metal beam, but it theoretically helps.
Yes.
Speaking of COVID, we looked up the numbers before the segment. Last year, because obviously the new shot is just out a few weeks or something, only 22% of adults in the country got it, 14% of kids. We've discussed this before, but the good news is we're going to have flu vaccine or whatever you call it in your house, a mist, hopefully in a year.
Yes.
The bad news is, with all of the ill-informed sickness that people were spreading from the top down about the COVID vaccine and about COVID, we're still suffering under this anti-vax kind of, we don't need it, we're not going to do it, it's a political plot thing.
Yes.
So what are people like, and shingles is another thing, you're supposed to get
we can
over
talk
50
about
or whatever.
Yep.
One of the most painful things allegedly ever, and you can
Correct.
lose your vision.
Yes.
And there's a 97% effective vaccine, which I've gotten.
He's clearly done his
Well, I
reading.
know, I am really,
I'm very
I'm like
impressed.
her. The second you can get them, I'm at Walgreens.
Yes. Absolutely.
So are you still dealing with the fallout from this
hesitancy?
anti-vax crap?
Absolutely. I will say the first thing that everybody needs to understand is that the COVID vaccine is not a booster. So this vaccine that has come out has specifically targeted the new variant that was spreading over the summer, the flirt variant. It's part of the same family. So it is not seen as something just to boost yourself. It's actually seen as a new vaccine. It's a one-time vaccine unless you have a low immune system, in which case it might be 2, or you're getting it for the first time in your child. And I actually think there's been really good data and really good discussion about both the combination of what happened with, spreading misinformation and the ways in which public health made missteps about spreading or giving information. And I'm not blaming public health. I will just say that as a reminder, when all of this was coming out, we were running at 1,000 miles per hour. And we were trying to give data the moment it was out. So, for instance, when we talked about the COVID vaccine when it first came out, it was better news than we ever could have anticipated. But we talked about it being 100, there was reports out saying it was 100% effective. First of all, no vaccine is ever 100% effective. And then the second thing it said is, if you get your vaccine, you will never get infected. That is not how it works. It mitigates the risk of getting severely infected. So I think part of it is we had to backpedal, and then people said, well, I got the vaccine and I got sick, so it just doesn't work. So what's the point? And I think, hopefully one of the many things that we've learned in the public health sector is we need to be very clear about the communication we are giving the first time, so we're not having to backpedal, and that we haven't lost trust to begin with, because we are desperately still trying to rebuild trust, to your point. I will say that many of my patients who I know deeply trust me, we still have difficulty around the COVID vaccine.
Talking to Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett.
But how can it, and I realize as I'm asking the question that it doesn't really have a good answer. How can it still be possible that someone running for president who has, at least roughly 46% support in this country would consider someone like RFK, a notorious anti-vaxxer, to be in his cabinet? I mean, when you look at the level of damage that's done and how you try to work your way back from that, is there something that a different administration, perhaps the Harris administration, can do to build that back more quickly? Because people are still people are going to die. I think tens of thousands yearly die just from the flu, and a commensurate number with COVID.
Well, I clearly don't have a certain answer, but I do think that it's very wise that Harris is running on a campaign of freedom, because I think this idea of freedom is what got people so upset, saying, you're telling us we have to do X, Y, and Z. We are Americans. We feel like our freedom is being stripped, and therefore we are going to rebel against you. And we're going to rebel against this word, especially when information is all over the map, in part because that's how science happens. Science is an evolving field, right? So I will tell you that if we can truly say, this is about freedom and it's about taking care of you and taking care of your loved ones and coming back to that basic message of what is public health and how has it saved us from the last, many, polio, we don't have polio, we don't see polio,
Right.
all the things, smallpox, all the things that we don't see anymore is a result of effective public health and vaccines.
You were so much, people are dopes, let's face it. I mean, these people that are talking about their freedom, those are the same people, every one of whom was having their kid vaccinated at school for everything that was mandated before the COVID battle started. And all of a sudden, we can't, really. In any case, I'm glad you're doing it.
Yes.
You wrote a fabulous piece in the Boston Globe about explain what reentry is, about helping people who are re-entering society after incarceration.
Yep.
Talk about it.
So reentry, so returning citizens is the phrase that we use for folks who have spent time incarcerated and are coming back to live in communities. And I actually started the piece talking about a handwritten letter that I had received at my office address at the hospital from a man who is incarcerated in Virginia who had read a Boston Globe op-ed that I'd written last year about a jobs training program. So
great.
In and of itself, I was like, well, good for the Norfolk, Virginia, prison giving a Boston Globe subscription to folks, there, asking specifically about how he could get a job when he came out of prison and the importance for him in terms of his hope for employment coming out of prison. And so I really wanted to highlight the health impact of folks who are coming out of prison, the fact that they're 13 times more likely to die just within the first 2 months of re-entry into communities, in part, of course, because of problems with employment and problems with housing and problems with not getting any medication or access to health care. So I wanted to highlight it. There are, I will say, some fabulous programs that are working on reentry and employment. In fact, I just had the privilege of being with Attorney General Andrea Cabral earlier this week, and her team is working on economic mobility for folks coming out of incarceration, and actually has a whole kind of scaffolding that they're going to move forward. So it is just the importance of remembering that jobs post-incarceration is just as important of a health care issue as medications.
Well, also the other thing is you spent your life in law enforcement. It makes the rest of us safer too when people are employed, feel secure. And so it's not just a wonderful thing for your fellow men and women, but it's also helps you. Did you do this kind of stuff when you were doing sheriff?
Well, that was the point that I was going to make, is that people don't, Massachusetts is far beyond, you make the point about federal and states, which is very apt. People think what we do in Massachusetts is what's done everywhere. The Federal Bureau of Prisons doesn't do anything like it. Massachusetts sheriffs started doing reentry in 2001, which was even before my time as sheriff. But we've been doing it so long. It's two things. We have houses of correction. Houses of correction don't exist in other states.
That's correct.
It's the state prison or jail. So we have this intermediate place where reentry can really sort of take hold. And we have it at the state prison system. But to your point, it has taken us between 2001 and now to be as good as we are.
That is correct.
We still don't necessarily measure even the health disparities with newly released people who have been through reentry versus people who have not. We don't even do that in Massachusetts.
Yes, that is a new
How do we
place.
do it? And
Yes.
how do we get other states to see it as a health problem?
Yeah.
And measure it better here?
Yeah. So, I think we could talk all day about this. I
Right.
feel
And we only
really,
have, like 2 minutes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I do think that, Massachusetts, again, reminding us all that we get to be actually models for a lot of these innovations, in this work and healthcare, et cetera. I think the more that we study it, the more that we put out our data, the more likely that other states can follow suit. But to your point, and actually what I was talking to the Attorney General's office about is, as you're working on economic mobility, how are you getting health leaders involved
Right.
so that we can actually look at some of the quantitative and qualitative health outcomes of these programs?
You need to be at the table.
You need
when
to be
this-
at
yes,
the table,
then
and we
measuring.
need to understand that the holistic nature of all of these interventions.
So could you, before you go here, I'm always proud of myself when I'm about to go to bed and I pop in a little baby aspirin. I'm saying, Jim, you are a totally irresponsible human being, but at bedtime, you really get it. You get that little tiny Bayer aspirin. I have like 1,000 in a bottle. And then I wake up this morning to read something in preparation for you to find out that was a big mistake. So what is the agreed upon, assuming it is agreed upon, benefit or detriment?
Yes.
I know it's not the right word,
Yeah.
for taking a baby aspirin when you're over 50 or whatever it is.
Okay, so it's remarkable to me that you popping just a little baby pill is so reassuring
It
too
is.
at night
It
with
is.
everything that's happening in the world. So kudos to you
Thank
for
you.
that.
I appreciate that.
And without knowing all your medical history, and not asking,
She actually knows a decent amount of my medical history, yes.
So I will say that since 2019, we've actually had data and recommendations out that the only people that should be taking a daily baby aspirin are people who have had a history of a stroke, not a bleeding stroke, but a clot, or a history of a heart attack, or have serious heart disease. The rest of us should not be taking it. You know why? Because the risk of bleeding inside your stomach is 2 times greater.
Greater
When
than
you're-
the help that you might get?
Yes. So the risks actually outweigh
hopeless.
the benefits. JD's
How many people in
laughing
the
over
audience,
there.
raise your hand if you knew what Katherine Gergen Barnett just said to be true? That's like literally like 8 people out of a full room.
Yeah.
I mean,
All right.
that is
No, there's
horrible.
more than that.
Yes. So it's actually remarkable. I mean, we did have a pandemic to deal with since 2019, so the message probably wasn't, as spread as it should have been, but it is a really important public health message. I'm constantly deprescribing aspirin for my patients.
So before you go, just we only have a couple of
Yes.
seconds here. So what I take every night before I go to bed with an aspirin is a half liverwurst sandwich. Now,
perfect.
I assume that I can continue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one day you had me talking about hot dogs at the end of the
And
show.
you don't have to talk
and
about
now you're
liverwurst,
talking
I'm
about
just asking
liverwurst. My mother's British, so I have a strong feeling, a positive feeling actually towards liverwurst. And so it was
that's
often
beautiful.
in my lunch as a child. I couldn't trade my lunch with anybody else's lunch.
That's a
of
beautiful
course.
story.
Well,
Very
you both,
moving.
you both have mine.
Doctor, it's great to see you. I'm sorry
Good to
it's
see you.
shortened today. We'll see you soon. Take
Can't
care.
wait. Take care.
We've been speaking with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at the Boston Medical Center and Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School. Coming up after a quick break, retired federal judge.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, are you ready to gear up with your night vision goggles, GPS, and industrial strength bug spray to find buried treasure in the woods of New England? A real-life treasure hunt created by gaming designers is underway, and a $25,000 prize could be yours. Plus Saturday Night Live at 50. Does it still feel alive as a cultural touchstone? That and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you and Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. United around a vision for public access to revolutionary education, UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Andrea Cabral is sitting in today for Margery Egan. Joined now on Zoom for another, unfortunately, truncated edition for a variety of reasons of On the Docket with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, it's good to see you.
Good to be on.
Good to see you, Judge. So we got this announcement this week that Jack Smith asked for and was given permission to file what we'll call an expanded brief based on the modified indictments that he's put before Judge Chutkan. He received permission to do so. What's your take on this? Do you think that Judge Chutkan should have allowed him to file the expanded brief? But more importantly, it's our understanding that portions of this brief, if not most of it, may be made public. You think she's right in doing that as well?
Well, there are two different questions. One is an expanded brief. This is his case, right? This is his case. This is the Supreme Court has created a proceeding, a hearing before the trial that was unheard of before, right? Where the judge has to decide what is totally immunized. We already know everything having to do with the Department of Justice, namely Trump's attempting to get a name of different attorney generals to so that they could do his bidding, and simply announce there was an investigation of election fraud. That's out. And that's out. And so the question is, what of its case to the air before the trial begins? You know, no prosecutor would ever want to have all of that laid out in advance. She's giving him more time because he has to lay out everything. And by the way, the everything is not just what we know, namely the January 6th, from the January 6th committee, but what has come out under their subpoena power. So, for example, what has Mark Meadows stuff that the January 6th Congressional Committee found, but also stuff that only a prosecutor could get with his subpoena power and the power of prosecution. So that's why it had to be this major brief. Then the next question is how much of it should be public? And in a way, this is not a legal observation. In a way, the more she makes public, the more it begins to feel like the Comey memo in 2016. She makes public information that otherwise would have come out at a trial. And it could be information the public doesn't know about, hasn't already been baked into the electorate. So, I mean, it will have an interesting impact. Various news organizations have sued to get as much of this in the public as possible. And she'll have to make a decision about what's appropriately sealed and what should be in the public eye. Again, bearing in mind that what's going to make it into the public eye will be making it in October.
Nancy Gergen, I made the same point about the Comey memo to a guest yesterday. Oh, it's Andrea Cabral who jumped down my throat. Interestingly, she isn't jumping down Judge Gertner's throat. But having said that...
Well, you didn't... I thought you wanted to ask a question.
But I want to know, you didn't take a position. You used to be exactly what Judge Chutkan is, a federal district court judge. Considering the Comey issue, considering, I don't know if this is relevant at all, but if Trump is elected, not only would we not see the memo, there'd be no case because he'd order the Justice Department to fire Jack Smith, which he would have the power to do. So based upon all these factors, whatever's legitimate, whatever is not, whatever, what would you have done if you were Judge Chutkan? And again, you were Judge Chutkan, just in a different courtroom. What would you do?
I've thought a lot about that, Jim, actually. Just to sort of the Biden, Obama, Clinton judges have been due process judges. They've been bending over backwards to give the former president all the due process you can imagine. Some of the Trump appointees have been obviously different and have been happy to do things that no one else has done, reverse precedent, et cetera. Very different approaches to the job. And so I don't know what I would do at this time in her position, but my instinct is to expose as much of this to the air as the government seeks and as the press seeks to do.
I could not agree more. I know.
I'm with you too, by the way.
Yeah, because I mean, it can't be that the former president has sort of pulled all of the strings imaginable and gotten special favors that nobody else has gotten. The immunity decision, shot right up. The obstruction decision shot right up. We've talked about the Georgia case where what Fani Willis did was ridiculous, but should not have affected the trial in any way. So he's gotten the benefit of the doubt, and it seems to me that this is a moment where if you're dividing between making public that which the government wants to make public isn't otherwise protected, you should do it.
And as I pointed out yesterday, Jack Smith I think is a brilliant prosecutor. He is actually doing a redacted version of the brief for her, knowing what she's up against and how she has to parse through all of this and having a sense of what she might want redacted. He's actually going to submit a redacted version of the brief that she can take a look at and adopt or not.
That's not unusual. There's a protective order in this case, and a protective order is something that basically treats the documents, determines.
Oh, I thought he was doing it because she'd have so much to look through.
No, there's a protective order that says sensitive materials are materials that have personally identifying information, grand jury materials, sealed orders. But then there's a category of transcripts and interview reports, which would not otherwise be sealed, and I'm not sure I understand why it would be sealed here. There's a pro and con. I mean, the government doesn't want to let the content of what the witnesses are going to say out in the ordinary course, but this is not in the ordinary course.
So she can just release the redacted brief that he gives.
She could release the redacted briefing. She could sort of do this category by category.
I don't mean to belabor this, but let me belabor this just for a second. I am glad to hear you say what you think you would do, and I know that Andrea and I would like that to happen too, and I know this is probably not relevant to a judge's decision, but what's relevant to me as a voter is, again, if he wins, it all disappears except for the state prosecutions. A couple of weeks ago, you told us that you thought Judge Merchant, in advance, you said, would postpone the sentencing until after the election, and I believe you said you thought that was the right thing. Why was that the right thing, to postpone the sentencing until after November 5th? But in this case, the January 6th case, you think that Chutkan should release some version of what Jack Smith has filed prior to the election. Why the difference?
Well, because they're different proceedings. So Chutkan is litigating a case right now. That's what she's in the midst of doing. And she said she's not going to slow it down for the election. She did. And the Supreme Court has created this really ponderous process. And that whatever she does, and this case will wind up on appeal. She'll say this is in and this is out, and they'll all go up on appeal. And if the Supreme Court is true to form, they'll probably take it on an expedited basis, bending over backwards again for the former president. The sentencing is different. The sentencing is the end of the proceeding. Nothing more has to be litigated than what his punishment is. And the people put off sentencing for all sorts of reasons. I didn't think that it was illegitimate. It'll be an enormously complicated sentencing, particularly if he's in office. But it's even an enormously complicated sentencing now. So it made sense to put that off.
Okay.
It's really a legal issue. She doesn't have to put that off.
Can I ask one more? Oh, you go ahead, and then I have one more question about this.
And I do want to get to the rest of the stuff, but I do want to say, so why couldn't he have sentenced him but suspended the sentence until after the election?
He could, but I think he wants to figure out what to do.
Oh.
He doesn't know what to do. And we've talked about this before. I think that's a genuinely open question. Andrea, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
You can sentence him for the acts that he was convicted of. You can also increase his sentence based on the other cases in which there are just allegations. That's allowed under the sentencing law. But perhaps one shouldn't do that in this case.
Well, there's always lack of remorse.
And
that's a good catch-all for increasing a sentence.
Intergalactic, right? Yes, no question about it.
My last question about this, I meant to ask you yesterday, but I asked Chuck Todd, who's not a lawyer, instead. My fear, because I am totally, as we all are apparently, for transparency here, so the voters have some idea what the special prosecutor believes the case against him is in some detail, is let's assume Chutkan announces next week, Judge Chutkan announces next week, I'm going to release the redacted thing, as you two were talking about. Does Trump have the ability to appeal that decision before the release actually happens? And I assume if the answer is yes, that means we're never going to see anything anyway before the election. What's the answer to that?
The answer to that in the ordinary case with an ordinary Supreme Court and an ordinary bench would be no, he has no right to appeal. That's exactly the kind of discretionary decision a trial judge has. You don't have a right to, for an immediate appeal if I say it's not hearsay or it is hearsay. Those kinds of things are part of the bucket of tools that a judge has. But this is different. If she decides to release the redacted version, he would file what's called a writ of mandamus, which is an extraordinary procedure to direct the judge to do something. He'd go up to the D.C. Circuit, who I imagine would say, as they would say in any case, this is a trial judge. She's exercising her discretion, fine. Then they would take it to the Supreme Court, and ladies and gentlemen, who knows?
Right.
Who knows? This is not a Supreme Court that looks like any court any of us have ever seen, so who knows? But yes, it could delay that. That would be, I want to say that would be extraordinary if they intervened in a trial at that level of minutia, but everything is extraordinary.
So's Dobbs, right?
Yeah, right.
And speaking of Supreme Courts that desperately need to be expanded.
We literally have 45 seconds.
Can you in 45 seconds just give us the briefest overview of this bill that's before the legislature now about adding 6 justices?
I think that that's the right thing to do. I think that it's the right thing to do given the workload of the court. I think it's the right thing to do with a court that has been so completely packed that this super conservative majority is in place for decades. And that really is inconsistent, not with a specific constitutional provision, but inconsistent with the structure of our government. You now have one part of the tripartite scheme, the Supreme Court, which is way more powerful than any of the others for an extended period of time. So yes, I think this is the right thing to do.
And we should say quickly, we've said it 1,000 times, for those who say, well, Congress can't do that. In fact, Congress has changed the composition of the Supreme Court many times in our history. Nancy Gertner, it's great to see you as always.
Join us for a virtual paint night with certified Bob Ross instructor Nicholas Hankins. Sign up by October 7th and we'll send you a kit before the paint night on October 29th. Reserve your spot now at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Umbrella Arts Center, presenting Network, a multimedia stage adaptation of the Oscar-winning classic film, September 20th to November 3rd. theumbrellarts.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan, with you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
I'm Morning Edition co-host Paris Alston.
And I'm Morning Edition co-host Jeremy Siegel. You and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org.
GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Business columnist from the Globe, Shirley Leung, discusses the exodus of black CEOs from the city and Boston Mayor Michelle Wu and a bunch of seniors' efforts to get Beacon Hill to let the city do what they think is fair with Boston's property tax.
I'm Andrea Cabral, in for Margery Egan. We'll close the show trying to lift Jim's typical grumpy mood. We've all seen photos of Moo Dang, the pygmy hippo from Thailand who's stealing everyone's hearts. What is it about baby animals that have us all enraptured? Turns out, there's a science to that. And why does Jim turn into a different person when he watches cute animal videos? Call or text next. It's Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says search and rescue efforts that began early this morning will continue throughout the day Friday following Hurricane Helene. Central Florida Public Media's Danielle Pryor reports says only 2 fatalities have been reported so far.
The death toll could rise as the teams go into harder hit areas. DeSantis says more teams are deploying today. He says the teams have exhibited heroism so far.
But I think what you saw is I think a lot of people did go out in hazardous conditions. I think that they put themselves at risk in order to make sure other people were safe, and that's very admirable.
The statewide Hope Florida agency made up of nonprofits and faith partners will be deployed to help Floridians who are experiencing non-emergencies like clearing yard debris later today. For NPR News, I'm Danielle Pryor in Orlando.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams has pleaded not guilty to corruption charges. After his arraignment this afternoon, Adams' attorney Alex Spira told reporters the case stems from the statements of one staffer.
The entire body of evidence is one staffer that says there was a conversation.
But the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York says a lengthy investigation has uncovered evidence of multiple crimes, including that the mayor allegedly traded political favors with the Turkish government. Israel's prime minister struck a defiant tone at the United Nations today amid growing calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and in Lebanon. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports that Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will continue to fight what he describes as a 7-front conflict with Iran and its proxies.
Many diplomats walked out as Netanyahu took to the podium to, in his words, set the record straight. He says the war in Gaza could end now if Hamas surrenders and releases all hostages.
But if they don't, we will fight until we achieve victory, total victory. There is no substitute for it.
His invited guests in the gallery were the ones applauding in the mostly empty General Assembly Hall. Netanyahu also vowed to continue to strike Hezbollah in Lebanon until the militant group pulls back. The U.S. and France have been pushing for a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, New York.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has met with former President Donald Trump. The Ukrainian leader's trip to Trump Tower came a day after he met with Vice President Harris.
After November, we have to decide, and we hope that the strength of the United States will be very strong, and we count on it.
Zelensky commenting on his decision to meet with both presidential candidates. Trump says he supports Zelensky as well as Russian President Vladimir Putin, who ordered the military invasion against Ukraine more than 2 years ago. Harris made it clear that if she is elected, she continued to fully support Ukraine. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. About a dozen workers with the Massachusetts Red Cross are traveling south today to assist in areas hit by Hurricane Helene. The storm made landfall in Florida last night as a Category 4 hurricane, leaving millions in the southeast without power and causing severe flooding. Communications Director Kelly Eisner shared how Red Cross volunteers plan on assisting the affected areas.
Every disaster is a little bit different. However, the Red Cross does have a playbook that we operate from. You know, we know kind of what the needs are going to be and what the challenges are going to be sometimes. And then, you know, it's a very fluid situation. But again, pre-positioning supplies, warehouses that have pallets of water, cots, things like that, that helps with shelters.
Around 40 first responders with Massachusetts Task Force 1 arrived in the region yesterday as that area braced for these storms' big impact. Numbers are starting to trickle in on how long-term shutdown of either the Sagamore Bridge or the Bourne Bridge would affect the Cape Cod tourism industry. Results of an economic analysis were unveiled at a One Cape summit yesterday in Harwichport, and they show that a complete and unplanned shutdown of one bridge for up to 5 years could mean the loss of 11,200 jobs, stemming from a drop in tourism paired with a big loss of commuters willing to travel to the Cape for work. And for a bridge closing for 6 months, followed by 16 months of lane closures, would mean about 2,600 jobs would be lost over the 22-month period. 74 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Andrea Cabral is sitting in for Margery. Hello again, Andrea.
Hello again, Jim.
Hello there. We're joined now at the desk by Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung. Shirley also hosts the podcast Say More with Shirley Leung. New episodes drop every Thursday. Hey, Shirley.
Hi, Jim.
Hi,
there.
Shirley.
Hi, Andrea.
Shirley, you did a piece a couple of days ago about the recent exodus of a number of Boston's black CEOs. And just talk about why you did the piece and whether or not you see it as a trend, or is it noticeable because one of those CEOs was Claudine Gay and her exit was so incredibly public? Why do you think it's happening, and what does it sort of foreshadow?
So you might remember a few weeks ago, Kane Hayes, who was the relatively new CEO and who's black of one of the major health insurers in town. I think it's Points 32 Health. He stepped down unexpectedly. I was like, he just got there, not that long ago. Maybe he's been there 3 years. And it made me start to think, I wonder who else is gone, And I was like, well, what's going on? So I started poking around, and then I started to create a list. I was actually really surprised. It's not only Claudine Gay, right, who stepped down from Harvard in January, but if you look back 9 months, I counted at least 10 black CEOs or presidents or heads of organizations who have stepped down, and people keep on giving me more names as well. I mean, from the president of Brigham Women's Hospital, black CEO stepped down, and Ken Turner, who is the black CEO of the Mass Life Sciences Center, he stepped down as well. That's a quasi-state agency, and people leave for different reasons. Some people were pushed out, some people moved on for better opportunities, but I wanted to take a step back and say, what is going on here? Why are so many of these CEOs leaving this year? And many of them were celebrated when they arrived not that long ago after the murder of George Floyd. There was this racial reckoning. Everyone's like, we need to be more inclusive, we need to elevate more black leaders, and that happened, which was extraordinary. We all saw it, right? But also what's terrible right now, a very troubling trend, now we see the reverse happening. We see many of them leaving already.
It's like
the
DEI.
issue is who replaces you.
Yeah.
Who gets the seat when you go?
And I looked and I said, almost in every instance, replaced by a white CEO, either permanently or on an interim basis. And I said all these organizations, we as a city, we as a region need to look at what happened. Were these leaders supported by their board? Did they give them enough support? Were they only celebrated but not given support? Maybe their expectations were really high, set too high because they were considered trailblazers.
Well, I think the point that you raised in your column and Andrea just touched on about who replaced them, you can't judge in an individual situation if a black CEO is replaced by a white person. I mean, it is what it is unless you know something more. But when you see a trend like you described in your column, and go back another column, when you talked about Claudine Gay and other people of color in leadership disappearing from Harvard, and overwhelmingly they're replaced by white people. What it suggests to me, which I'm sure some will consider to be totally unfair, is that just like the embrace of DEI in so many places by corporate America and universities right after George Floyd was executed was proven to be performative because the first opportunity they had to run in the other direction, they did. They appointed black CEOs and chief whatever the hell they are, and the second they can step back and, another example, he's not a CEO. The guy you featured, because he was the only tenured professor who had the courage to talk to you in your piece about Harvard, which was similar, Khalil Gibran Muhammad, when he was on after your piece, we asked him, when he was attacked personally and by name by Virginia Fox, who is the totally uninformed, vicious chair of the House Education and Something Committee, which is the committee before which the university presidents appeared, when she singles his course at Harvard as essentially what's wrong with America. I said to him, did any leaders of Harvard reach out to you to show you support? The president did not, the interim president, Alan Garber, and he said the head of the Kennedy School sent him a text, nothing public, sent him a text, which to me is proof that all this was BS. In some individual cases there was care. Do you think that's an unfair conclusion?
I don't think it's unfair. I can't say for every situation.
Of course, obviously.
But yes, I think some of that is going on. And I think that, we need, I think, more than just the Black community needs to care. I think all of us need to care because, as I, wrote in this piece, diversity matters. It matters. It's better for the research show that it's better for the bottom line. Yeah. Representation matters.
You know why I'm laughing?
Yeah,
because a year or two ago, Andrea and I had a conversation about something not dissimilar. And I said, why don't you tell me what to do or us to do about this? And she said, I'm not here to tell you what to do about this. You figure out what to do about it. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I think I said I'm not here to manage your feelings around this. It's
I love
not
that.
my job to manage your feelings around this. But part of the reason I say that is because I think we consistently look at. So you say in the wake of George Floyd, there's this reckoning, right? That's just people for a period of time saying, oh, maybe we. This shouldn't have happened to this man, and now I feel a little guilty, let's do something. We spend a lot of time on talking about the symptom. The symptom is the death of George Floyd. The actual cause is the truth that left to their own devices, because racism is institutional, these things never have staying power. You can't have equal voting rights without a Voting Rights Act. John Roberts is dead wrong saying that it is a solution in search of a problem, because as soon as they truncate it, states go back to doing what they were doing before, which was suppressing votes and throwing people off the rolls. This is the exact same thing. And we should be talking more about why that is such a relentless pursuit, keeping people out of the opportunity that they would otherwise have. Why is that such a relentless pursuit on the part of people who had institutions versus, we put some people in and now we're going to take it back? That's why I say that to you.
You know what's interesting to me? I hadn't thought of this till just now. You wrote a piece the other day also. This is like the Shirley Leung tribute hour, talking about some new business group, which in my opinion is totally unnecessary because taxes and everything are so oppressive here. And by the way, my favorite part of it is it's a secret group, with the exception of John Fish.
Secretly financed.
They don't want to, well, that's secret. They don't want to know who's...
the group is public, but you don't know who's funding it.
So,
exactly.
Don't you think that rather than fighting taxes on the wealthy, which they are, that maybe instead they should decide, this is a city. We just had a woman here who was bused as a 14-year-old to South Boston High. It's 50 years later. These 10 black CEOs are leaving town pretty quickly, and we don't know exactly why, but it's a lot of people, a lot of circumstantial evidence. Why don't these white business leaders decide instead this is something that needs our support and attention, rather than fighting a millionaire's tax that affects me personally? I mean, really.
I'm hoping that it sparks a lot of conversation, that white CEOs and other and white CEOs and others get together and really think about what's happening. I quoted Michael Curry in my piece.
He had a great line in your thing.
Right, and he's a regular on this show, and I think it's.
Say what he said.
He said that we have to call it out. We have to talk about it, and we have to recognize that this is a problem, not that this is some passing phase,
But you know who called it out? I'm sorry, but this is the end of this. You called it out.
Yeah.
There aren't white business leaders who decided to hold a press conference, which we all would have covered and talked about, saying this is unacceptable. They know these people left town.
Right.
You had to call it out, and so let's see what they do about this. Talking to Shirley Leung, well, a guy who really does seem to believe in putting his money where his mouth is a guy who's a pretty good basketball player down the street, Jaylen Brown. He's talked about Black Wall Street. You did a thing on this Globe Summit, this 2-day event that I think concluded yesterday. Who'd you talk to, and how does it relate to what Jaylen Brown's trying to do?
So I wrote a story back in, I think, August, when Jaylen Brown, during the off season, after winning the championship, he decided to try to close the racial wealth gap. So he launched something called Boston Exchange. He wants to create $5 billion in generational wealth in community of color in Boston. And so I wrote about kind of the initiative launching in August. And And so during Globe Summit, we were hoping he would join us, but the preseason started this week, so he couldn't join us. But we had 3 leaders who are working with him closely on his initiative. Kim Tignor, who is an executive director of something called Take Creative Control out of DC. Malia Luzu, who is a diversity consultancy, runs a diversity strategy consultancy in Boston, former Berkshire Bank regional president, and also Iscata Jimenez, who is a serial entrepreneur, and she helped design, she also teaches at MIT and is I think an entrepreneur in residence at MIT, and she helped design this accelerator program that's part of Gaelynn's initiative, which is kind of the first kind of piece of the program that's been launched. And it was really interesting because she provided some details about who has applied for this accelerator program. I remember when I first wrote about it, they only gave people 2 weeks to apply. And
you got $100,000 for 3 years? Is that
$100,000 for 3 years, and then plus like other, legal services, support, mentoring, and maybe some even some office space. And I was thinking 2 weeks. That is not a lot of time. And Iscata talked about how they knew they'd be oversubscribed, and they were. They had over 500 applications. 500 applications submitted in a 2-week period.
That's incredible.
And she said the biggest group. This is only you have to be in Greater Boston, so it's not outside of Boston. And she said that they got the most applications from Dorchester. And they were very excited about who applied. I think one applicant wanted to be kind of the Haitian Rachel Ray. She wanted to kind of, I guess, celebrate Haitian food. And she said one of them, Iscata said, one was like a black chess champion in Massachusetts. And so he wanted to do something with chess. And so the whole idea is Gaelynn wants to focus on helping black and brown startups and entrepreneurs in the kind of what's so-called creative economy. Think about fashion designers, media, culinary arts. And I thought that was a really great idea because there are a ton of accelerators in our region, but they tend to focus on kind of what I call nerdy tech, not kind of this.
Explain what an accelerator is.
Well, accelerator is it's like a I don't know, it's like a boot camp. You get chosen for the program. There'll be 10 startups. You get cash, you get mentoring, you get network, you get, it's helping you to take your startup. Maybe it's already been up and running for a year or two, but you need a little push to get bigger and to get to scale. And so you go into this program for a year, 2 years, 3 years to try to really take your company to the next level.
And if I could say one last thing, the reason why that kind of thing is so important, besides just the cash, GBH has done some great reporting on this, as has the Globe, about the pathetically low percentage of city-state contracts. City, Boston, and Cambridge, by the way. Cambridge is even worse than Boston. And the state of Massachusetts is improving, at least in Boston and on the state level, not enough. That state and city contracts that go to firms led by people of color, when you hear people who are denied those contracts talk about it, one of the reasons they're denied is because they don't have the infrastructure around them that the big boys and girls do who've been at it for a while. And if they had this kind of support around them that Brown and these women are talking about, then they have a real chance to compete. So I think it's just spectacular.
So the 500, and they've done interviews now, and they're down to 18 finalists. And I think I should mention that it's not only Gaelynn Brown, but in particular with this accelerator fund, he has partnered with his teammate Drew Holiday.
Yeah.
So Drew and his wife Lauren Holiday. So now it's I think these 18 finalists are before the 3 of them to decide who are the lucky 10.
That's great.
So Shirley, this is, I think, it should be a story that leads the news all the time. It's Mayor Wu's proposal to increase the taxes on commercial property owners so that is not borne by residential property owners. And she certainly has been on this show talking about it, I believe, more than once. In fact, we have some sound from Mayor Wu talking about her going up to the Beacon Hill to try to get this tax plan through, and then what's happened when it hits the Senate.
I am
holding out every hope for this extraordinary step of reconvening. If this does not happen, every single resident in the city of Boston will know that their taxes are going up because the Senate did not vote through that last step, that there was a proposal on the table that was balanced, proven to have worked because it was used in the past, very reasonable, and again, protects residents and protects small businesses.
Now, when it came up the first time, there was not just whatever was going on between the mayor and Senate President Karen Spilka, but there was also a bit of a slap fight between Mariano, who's the speaker, and Spilka, because they had these dueling bills that they sent to each other late. So there was all of that kind of nonsense. Now, they have done some things in informal session. Now Mayor Wu has been back up to convene with people being called stakeholders in this. Where are we on it?
So yesterday there was a big meeting, as I understand, between Wu, I think the Senate, I think I heard maybe the Boston delegation. I mean, everybody was trying to come together. I think some of the business groups were there. They were trying to figure out, is there a compromise to be had? And I don't think they came out of that meeting with a compromise, but it's a good thing that they are all back at the table and talking. And I think there's a little grumbling behind the scenes because I think President Spilka wanted to try, kind of do this, take the temperature down, let's really roll up our sleeves. But on Wednesday, there was like a big protest with, seniors going on Beacon Hill saying that please don't raise our residential taxes. So kind of, I think this meeting was supposed to be, quietly happen, but instead, between the business groups and Wu at the city hall, but it kind of spilled out to the open. And so now pressure is back on everybody to come up, and so, but maybe pressure is a little good. Maybe it's good to have a little pressure.
Yeah, why not?
Well, can I be my usual broken record self? And don't worry, I'm not going to mention that they're on a 5-month vacation today. I've said this about 100 times. We've had this discussion with Wu. The notion that the elected mayor of the city of Boston has to go beg the legislature to let her do what she wants to do within her city. She's not proposing this for Fitchburg or for Springfield. She was elected to run the city. Let's assume it's the worst idea in history. Every economist says this is an abomination. The legislature should say, you're free to do it. We're not going to stand in the way, even though we have the power to. And if the voters of Boston don't like it, then throw her out of office. This notion that whether it's rent control, which they rejected, you may hate rent control, that's not the issue. The mayor and the city council like rent control, and they were elected by the people there. It is the arrogance of these, when they technically have the power. You've written brilliantly about liquor licenses. They finally cut a deal. Housing, taxes, it's really unbelievable. And because, as you said before, if I may say it, because nobody runs against them, because they're all Democrats, they essentially can do whatever they want and screw the popular will of the people of Boston.
And the developers of business, the people who own that property don't live in Boston.
That's another fine point.
I mean, and they spread their money around the legislature in terms of their donations, so they hold more truck with legislators who don't live in Boston than they do with a mayor who wants to do something they don't want her to do.
Right. Well, I think the business community, I know that a lot of the negotiations around, is this the only solution to the problem? Could we look at other potential solutions at a time when, property values are going down, people aren't coming back into the office, so they do feel, they're under some financial pressure.
But you know what you do? You go lobby the mayor of the city in which you do business, and it appears you lost. She doesn't agree with you. She thinks this is the best course. And I want to repeat it. It may be a horrible idea. I don't understand it well. I know what she says, that if it doesn't happen, property taxes will go up 33% for residential people. Now, maybe the business people are right, but I'll say it one final time. She was elected to run the damn city. Karen Spilka, from where she, Ashland or something, was not elected to run Boston. She was elected to run state affairs. And it is amazing to me there's not more of an uproar from local officials. Stay out of our business And again, if we do wrong, our own voters can decide.
Well, they
to
have
do.
to convince the legislature to change the
I know,
laws, and they won't change the laws.
Or
and
the
change
legislature,
power.
without changing law,
Right.
should just say we're just going to agree to what you do because you were elected. You know.
But let me ask you this, Shirley. One of the seniors was actually quoted, and I thought made a brilliant point. She said, "I didn't make you buy property in the seaport. When I bought my house, I bought it knowing that there was a risk that the property value would go down and I would suffer for that.
Yeah.
Nobody made you buy all that property in the seaport. Now nobody's down there or nobody's downtown. You want me to shoulder the burden for the unfortunate but almost inevitable result that you have lost money on your investment."
Right. Well, but the situation is that Wu is proposing to change it so that their taxes, they don't go down as much, because of their property values. But the thing is, the homeowners, their property values have gone up. That's the problem. The residential property values have only gone up. Meanwhile, commercial property values have gone down. And so they want to capture that savings, And so she wants to even it out. She wants to, raise it on property owners.
Okay, mind their own business. That's my view. That's the bottom line. Before you go, can you flagged a headline for us, which is not the first one that used Mayor Wu's name. And what was the headline that you were referencing, and what was your reaction?
This was, you probably saw it.
Oh,
Andrea had the same reaction
I did. Some cute editor decides to,
This was Politico. They have a newsletter, and they were writing about the Wu property tax meeting that was slated for Thursday, and the headline is wooing Boston's business bosses.
W-U-I-N-G.
Yes, W-U-I-N-G. And I just rolled my eyes. I was like, oh, this is so horrible.
Even if they had used the word woo, W-O-O, it would not have been
And it would have
bad.
been fine,
Yeah.
W-O-O-I-N-G.
Right.
But it's not as bad as the Boston Herald. Remember that? Remember the
Well,
cover?
that's why I couldn't remember. What was it?
Remember the Boston Herald? It was...
Is this during COVID or?
No, it was
go ahead.
I forgot. No, I don't think it was COVID. It was Charlie Baker while he was governor, and they put him in a takeout box. Remember, it was the controversy of was it DeLeo still around? He had
He was a
speaker. He had a $5,000 bill at a Chinese restaurant.
So what was the headline?
I forgot. What was the headline? Walk tall or something like that.
W-O-K. That's
walk
what it was.
tall.
Yeah, it wasn't Wu, that's right.
It was walk tall. Charlie Baker sitting in a takeout box, a Chinese takeout box. Yeah. It was so ridiculous. But I think the Herald editor ended up apologizing.
Is that really true?
Yeah, I think he did apologize for it.
Well, you have nothing to apologize for. You were really on a roll there, Shirley. I mean it. You were really driving the agenda here.
Tell us what's coming up.
Say more. We've got a new feature.
What is it?
And it's called the comment section. And my producer Anna Kusmer is filling in as guest host. And it's great. We take a very viral story, and then that had lots of comments, and we have the writer of the story talk about the comments, and
sort of like Boston Public Radio. Right. It comes to podcast,
right.
if you know what I mean.
And then we also invite Matt Bernstein, the letters to the editor on, and he talks about the letters he's gotten, and we hear from people who've written letters, and they get to read their letters, on the show, and we just talk about the reaction that stories have gotten and reaction to the comments. And I know Margery always, when Margery's here, we always talk about, do you read the comments?
She doesn't. I read the comments on her stories before she did. She couldn't handle it. I don't blame her. They are.
I have a love-hate relationship with comments. I mean, on one hand, it's great to read the comments because sometimes you get story tips from there, but then they're also incredibly, they can be racist, sexist, evil, because they're all anonymous, and so people are, people just say whatever they want, and sometimes they don't even make any sense, so it's good for, I guess, engagement, but sometimes you got to.
The solution is you just turn off the Wi-Fi in the mother's basement, and then you don't have to worry about it. Are we able to put this walk tall headline? Can we post it, or we can't? Jamie, we can't. Jamie just found it. It is Baker standing in a box of Chinese food.
It's awful, right?
It's really
I haven't
awful.
looked at it or paid attention to the Herald in decades.
What year was it?
April 2019.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember.
Shirley Leung, great to see you as always.
Thank you,
Keep
Shirley.
doing it.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much. Shirley Leung.
We've been speaking with Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung. She's also host of the podcast Say More with Shirley Leung. After a quick break, we're opening up the phone and text lines. We've all seen the picture of that adorable, chubby pygmy hippo from Thailand named Mu Dang. She's adorable. I love her. What is it about cute baby animals that brings us all together and makes us turn into completely different people?
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, Massachusetts Red Cross volunteers head down to Florida to help with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Offshore wind farms could be harming endangered white whales. And Springfield, Ohio had an overwhelming month after Donald Trump made false statements about Haitian migrants there. This week he focused on Charlevoix, Pennsylvania. We'll hear how that small town is responding. That's coming up at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bryant University, ranked 6th in the Northeast by U.S. News & World Report's 2025 Best Colleges, welcoming visitors for Fall Open House on October 19th and November 9th. Learn more at bryant.edu. And The Lyric Stage, presenting Urinetown the Musical. This musical comedy with a dreadful title is straight-faced silliness paired with cheeky musical parodies. September 20th through October 20th at Lyric Stage Boston. lyricstage.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrea Cabral sitting in for Margery. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We gave you a break from horrible politics at the top of the show. We talked about lawns. We're going to give you another break down the show. By now, as Andrea just said, you must have heard about Mu Dang. That's the baby pygmy hippo. Mu Dang, whose name charmingly translates to bouncy pork, made her debut in July at a zoo in Thailand. There's something about baby animals, I've said this on the show before, that many of us can't resist. Andrea proudly declares that 4 legs is better than 2 in her Twitter bio. So whether you're currently obsessed with Mu Dang or Pesto, Pesto's a 49-pound baby penguin, also going viral online, or some other snuggly internet animal, we want to hear from you at 877-301-8970. What is it about these cuddly, adorable baby animals that have many of us enraptured, turning us into oohing and eyeing softies kind of thing? Does it provide relief from the tension and stress that surrounds us every day? It sure as hell does for me. Or are you like our beloved vacationing Margery Egan, who saw a picture of Mu Dang the other day and grimaced? Here's what she said. Baby hippos, are they the cutest things ever? What do you think of that?
I prefer puppy.
Just look at the little baby hippo in the top picture there. What do you think of that?
I think he looks like a space animal.
Okay, so she's not into it. Andrea and I are. 877-301-8970. Do you go? I go all the time. Twitter, elsewhere online, social media, to find any baby animal you can doing something, preferably a video rather than just the still shot. And what kind of relief does it provide? For me, it is huge. I'm embarrassed to admit, but since we're trying to be transparent on the show, I would say that 40% of my non-work time online is looking at baby animal accounts. And I can't. Sometimes I can't go to sleep. I cannot shut it down. You're a huge animal person anyway.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a baby animal, although it's a bonus if they are a baby animal, but I do spend a certain amount of time, probably too much time, looking at other people's pets. I love the site We Rate Dogs, which
I haven't seen that one.
You got to go to We Rate Dogs.
I'll be there at 2:00.
The best dogs ever, the best puppies ever, but every Friday they do a 5-dog count away from however your day is going. But animals are just these pure things. They offer you unconditional love. They are delightful. We don't deserve them for the most part. And there is an actual science behind baby animals in particular. They're vulnerable looking and they do adorable things and they bring out our protective instinct.
Well, that's what that story was in the New York Times, wherever that story was, that said they elicit a caretaking instinct in not just women, because we theoretically don't care about anybody except ourselves, we that being men, but in men as well. And I don't know if that's what motivates me, but I'll tell you, it really brings down the temperature in a huge way. Here's an anonymous text. It has been shown that looking at pictures of baby animals, this is pathetic, but it's true, can boost your work productivity.
I'm sure that's right.
I keep this mantra on my desk at work. The number's 877-301-8970. Come on, admit it. You guys are in the same boat, except for Margery, of course. How do you relate to, and how often do you relate to, and how much do you intersect with, if that's the proper verb? Totally great. I mean,
well,
totally
she also screams, which is funny, and she's teething, so she likes to bite things. Like her keeper at the zoo,
yeah,
who communicates with her, spends a huge amount of time with her. She likes to sort of bite his knees because she's teething.
You know, this Mudang is in Thailand. And then a story I read about Mudang the other day, before I knew we were doing this, said there's a zoo in Cincinnati that has a pygmy hippo. But then a friend of mine told me yesterday, there's one at the Franklin Park Zoo. Does anybody know that here? Nobody in the audience does. Can you check, Jamie, and see if there is one over there and what its name is and
there are
whatever
only
else we need to do?
3,000 in the wild. There are only 3,000 pygmy
true?
hippos in the wild. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many are in captivity. I'm not a huge fan of zoos, but I get it.
Is this true what someone just posted? Mudang also has siblings. Mutun, which means stewed pork, and Muwan, which means sweet pork. I don't know if that is true. Someone just said that's
precious.
True, so it's unbelievable.
One of our texters just said, what's the name of the dog website Andrea just mentions? It's called We Rate Dogs. So you can go to Twitter and find We Rate Dogs. That's where they post the top 5 dogs of the week. And then they have the 10 out of 15 or the 15 out of 10 foundation where you can buy merch. But it's We Rate Dogs.
Okay, give us a buzz, 877-301-8970. So do you go out of your way to, because some people who are too embarrassed, who are my friends, say, you know, I'm scrolling through and I find something as if I really wouldn't do this otherwise. I target these things.
Yes,
I go
absolutely.
right for them when I'm feeling stressed, usually at night, at the end of the day, and I'm thinking about the next day, thinking about the state of the world, thinking about Donald Trump, thinking about whatever, and I go right there and I am like a transformed individual.
I look for them. People send them to
you?
Me. Oh, people will say, I knew you would love this because I'm so well known for wanting to just watch any animal of any kind anywhere. There's a guy that I follow on X named Claude Taylor who, I mean, I like his opinions. I think he's a smart guy. But he has enough land that he literally feeds deer on his land. He names them all. And he posts pictures every single day of the deer coming to eat. He's literally taking care of like generations of deer. And that's part of the reason I follow him. So it doesn't take much to get my attention.
Well, thanks to Nicole, we have some very, very good news. There is a pygmy hippo at the Franklin Park Zoo. It's named Ptolemy. Is that how you say it, I guess? Or Ptolemy, maybe. Who will be turning 4 years old next month. So that is really heartening, and I will be there, actually, in truth, next week to see little Ptolemy, or however you pronounce the name.
Mary from
877-301-8970, I'm sorry.
Mary's from Newfields, New
What's
Hampshire. She says, baby beavers. Enough said.
I've never seen a baby beaver.
No, there are people that are particularly like baby beavers and otters, baby otters. And they are really cute, but they've got their whole separate fan base just for them.
Well, you know, there's an old question that I've repeated. Have you ever seen a baby squirrel? People say, you have?
Yes, just once.
I don't think I've ever.
And I saw a baby turkey the other day, which is another thing.
I've seen it when the mothers are leading around their little turkeys through the streets of our communities. You see them. I see them from time to time. 877-301-8970 is our phone number. We'll get to your calls in a second. I don't know what the hell's going on, but we'll get to this in just a second here. You have any idea what a pygmy hippo weighs? I'm just curious, because they're tiny, but I bet you they're really dense, you know?
Yeah, you kind of get that impression that they're definitely, you know, built for the wild where they ordinarily live. But yeah, like she's chubby.
What's the picture here? Oh, this is a baby beaver. Do you want? Don't look. What are they called?
Oh, they're called kit.
Oh, you looked already.
Yeah, I had heard it before, but I wouldn't have remembered it.
Yeah,
where do you
go to see a beaver, by the way, other than the zoo? Where do you go?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay. And you got to leave the city. Thank you, Zoe. That's a very, very fine
People want to know if you have pets. And if
I do, actually. Well, it's true. It's interesting you say that. I never had a pet my whole life until my 2 daughters turned maybe 20-ish or something, and they each got a dog. and I was somebody who on the show in days gone by, when Margery would talk about Harry the Pea, best dog from C to C, it was her dog who since passed on, but it was a fabulous dog. I would ridicule her and people who are obsessed with their pets to the point of, what's the verb for when you make them human? I can't remember, when you act as if there's some... Anthropomorphize. Zoe's doing this whole segment for me. I'm here. Thank you.
Zoe's killing it.
And, well, she's a big animal person and a good buddy of Simon
And
Montgomery's,
she has the lovely Celine, her cat.
Is that the name of her cat?
Yes.
Okay,
gorgeous,
fine.
gorgeous.
So the answer to your question is I never had him until I sort of became, one time removed, totally in love in ways that are indescribable with my kids' 2 dogs. I mean, I really can't, I mean this sincerely, I cannot imagine not having these fabulous dogs.
I don't
in my
currently have, I've had dogs, but as an adult, I've only had cats, because I've always been in an apartment or a condo. Do not currently have a cat, but had 2 cats. I graduated to the 2, because I would foster 2 of them. And then sometimes I would keep the 2 that I foster, or if I gave the foster cats to the home they were going to, go out and get 2 cats.
Wow.
So, yeah, I had 2 cats. But it's really tough for me to lose them. I have a really hard time when they're gone, and it makes me wait longer to get new ones because I have a hard time.
Okay, so we're asking you if baby animals are as important to your sanity as they are to Andrea and mine. We'll start with Yanni on the road. You're first on Boston Public Radio.
Hi,
welcome, Yanni. How are you?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
We're well. I'm with my husband and I used to have 2 kittens that we got in Puerto Rico, and we loved them because they were so little and they were quite the characters. And we feel very much better when we're around cats. So we've been traveling around Europe a lot in the last year and always looking for kittens or cats to pet. And we look at YouTube videos at night with kittens and kitty cats because it makes us feel much better because we right now can't have any, and we just love them.
What does that do for you when you see the video? I know what it does for me. What does that do for you and your husband? You're sitting on the couch or in bed or wherever you are, and you're watching these cat videos. What does it do to you, Yanni?
I just feel relaxed. I feel a lot better about politics. I'm laughing, and I'm feeling like my blood pressure just comes way down. I don't even need a glass of wine. I just love the kitties.
Yanni, you're great.
Well,
Thank you.
I was going to ask. I wanted to ask you a question. Do you come from a family that had pets, or did you acquire sort of a love for pets on your own?
Well, I was an asthmatic child, and I couldn't have any kitty cats or dogs. So when I got older, I was determined to overcome this allergy, and because I've always been in love with animals, but very much cats.
They adopted us when we were in Puerto Rico.
Oh, and the kitties adopted us.
Wait, who's that in the background? Who's that guy, Yanni?
That's the driver.
My husband.
I was only kidding. Driver, it's a pleasure to meet you too. Thank you both for calling.
You know, she's absolutely right about that. I had forgotten about this. I am allergic to animal dander. And it doesn't stop me at all. I just kind of powered through it and just kind of, my mother said I used to come to the door with any animal I could find and I'd have it right up against my face. She said, your eyes would be running, your nose would be running, and you'd go, can we keep it? And you'd be crying because I didn't let you keep it. So it doesn't bother me at all. I'm allergic, but
aren't
there
those,
pets.
what are the kind of dogs that Ted Kennedy gave to the Obamas?
They're like
which
labradoodles.
Whatever the hell
No,
they are.
I want the fur. I want to have the fur experience, the full fur experience.
Okay, so here's Julie in Orleans. I hope this is real. Julie in Orleans texts, my ex was addicted to porn. My now husband is addicted to baby animal videos. I traded up for sure. P.S. Baby porcupines eating apples is the cutest ever.
I've actually seen baby porcupines
in life?
eating. No, like on social media, and she's right.
Oh my God. Rosie in Rhode Island, you're next, or whatever you are, on Boston Public Radio.
Hi,
Thank
Rosie.
you for calling. Hi.
Hi there, how are you?
Excellent.
Good. Hi, Rhode Island.
Hello there, fellow Rhode Islander. I just wanted to share that over the past few months, I've had a mama deer and a little fawn who periodically visited our backyard. And I actually caught a video of the fawn with the zoomies. And it is the cutest thing ever. I wanted to send it to you folks. I don't know if that's something that you're able to see or view, but if you're interested, I'd love to forward it to you.
Please do.
Zoomies are the best.
Forward it to us. Thank you, Rosie, for the call. By the way, and Diane from Milford says goats. I will push aside a child to feed a baby goat at the farm. And as I'm laughing at that, I realize we had a baby goat in the studio
We did.
a couple of months ago.
On a day that I was not co-hosting,
okay.
by the way, so I missed it.
And I held this thing, and I have to say, I really wanted to hold it. I was afraid it was going to, what, all over me, which it did not do. Did it have a diaper, Jamie? I can't remember. I don't know what it had. We have sound. There's sound of me holding it. Okay, here's sound of me holding this baby goat. Go ahead.
Oh, my God.
Beautifully done, Jim.
By the way, Margery is really jealous. Look at Margery.
She's trying to kiss you,
She
Jim.
was hoping the goat was going to run away from me, and the goat's not running away from me, is it, Margery?
You've done a wonderful job. You look like a mother holding a newborn over there.
You've answered your own question. I guess I have. It's the best 10 seconds I've ever done on radio.
By the way, I forgot, we also have a great TikTok video of exactly that if you go to Boston Public Radio's TikTok page. Where do you want to go next there?
Margaret, who's in the car. Hi,
Hello,
Margaret.
Margaret in the car.
Hey, how are you?
Excellent.
Good. Well, I agree with Andrea. I had 2 dogs and had grandchildren, and I said, no more dogs. And I got a mini golden doodle sitting right by me right now. But I resonate with you, Jim, because I was at my child and her wife's farm in Woodstock, New York area, and I got to hold one of the baby goats.
How's that feel?
It was adorable.
Adorable. It is. It is.
I mean, it is just, I never thought in my life I'd hold a goat, but I tell you. But I know another thing you might want to fact check. Trump is one of 4 presidents that did not have a pet in the White House.
No, we do not need to fact check it.
Never
he
has.
is one of the very few presidents who has not had any kind of animal. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt who had everything, from
Right.
snakes to llamas to turtles. But it is almost unheard of in presidential history that a president does not have an animal. And I will go one step further, Margaret. What does that say to you when you're in a position where your predecessors have all had pets and you don't? Does that say anything about you, or is that unfair?
It says to me that you're the only important being in the world.
Totally.
And that any living sentient being is precious.
Absolutely
Margaret,
right.
so glad you
Margaret
called.
is absolutely right.
Thank
do
you
you know,
for the
I
call.
used to have to do, when you're an elected official, you have to do parades. Did you know that at one point, I don't know if it's still true, but at one point there were 26 of them during parade season. 26 parades you'd have to go to, and you've got to walk.
throughout the...
Yeah, walk and wave and all that. You know how I used to get through the parades? You're supposed to go from side to side and sort of shake people's hands.
I know very well, yeah.
I used to go from side to side, but I'd target the people who bought their dogs or their pets.
Oh, that's
so
pretty
that
good.
I wouldn't even shake their hand first. I would bend down and pet the dog, and then I'd go, "Oh, hi, yeah, thanks, please vote for me," and then go back to the dog.
I think that's a wise move.
Yeah, I think
Jesse, you're in Manchester, New Hampshire, and you're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Jesse.
Hey, hi. So I have, sorry, I'm hearing an echo, but I don't know if
We're
that
good
matters.
on your RN, so give it a go.
Okay, great. So, So a story about a regular baby hippo, not a pygmy hippo.
It's okay.
But about 7 years ago, there was a premature baby hippo born at a zoo, and I think it was maybe in Ohio or something, whose name was Fiona. And it was like the whole country was just like glued to the story of this premature hippo, and was she going to survive? And my husband and I at the time were just like really into looking at pictures of her, and it was just like the cutest and also weirdest looking little thing. Anyway, I was pregnant at the time, and we did end up naming our daughter Fiona. I would never admit, I don't think anybody knows listening, I would never admit that we named her Fiona after that baby hippo, but I also wouldn't deny that wasn't part
Wait
of
a second. Does Fiona know who Fiona is named after?
I would, nope.
Oh, my
Named
God.
after a hippo.
I think that is perfectly fine and actually admirable, Jesse. Thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
Well, the other choice would be Shrek's wife. So I think between the two, the hippo is probably better.
You know, I have some bad news, actually. According to Axios, no matter who wins in November, it looks like a typical member I'm reading from the first family will not be moving into the White House a pet, meaning Kamala Harris, and as they call him, which I hate the term, second gentleman. I hate first lady. I hate second gentleman. Why don't they have a pet? Why don't they have a pet?
The things that upset you are
I know. I'm sorry. I'm
absolutely
trying to be honest.
hysterical.
I mean, doesn't that kind of form?
Why don't they have? I don't know.
Why
You
don't
should, that should be one of the questions that's asked in the next debate.
Next debate, the next debate that isn't happening. I think that's an excellent idea.
I think they'll probably get one once they move into the White House, because a White House pet. I mean, people went nuts over Socks the cat. There was like all kinds of Socks merch.
Was
there
that
was
Clinton's?
Socks.
Who was
Yep, Socks
Clinton's?
was Clinton's. Socks on sax. There was like because he played
'Cause he's sax,
saxophone.
right.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they didn't get one. But they should. If they don't have one, they need to get one. That's
No,
all
they
I can
really
say.
do quite quickly, I would say. Oh, by the way, and this is another good point. We're missing all this history. The Bidens had dogs. That didn't go terribly well.
Yeah, but that's because Major Biden knew who he was biting. He was biting people in the Secret Service.
That is horrible.
And no, I'm sorry. I think the dogs know. Dogs and cats and children know.
Look at you.
I'm just telling you. That's just true.
And baby
They know.
hippos.
They know.
We're talking about baby animals and how this is obviously embarrassing. Well, it's not embarrassing for either of us, actually. Maybe embarrassing for you. Let's go to Lynn in Buzzards Bay. You're next on Boston Public Radio. What's your deal?
Hi, Lynn.
Oh, I have to tell you, I just adore your show.
Thanks.
I have been so educated since I've been listening to it.
Wait. You're calling during a segment on baby animals and saying you've been educated by us on the show?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. It's very kind of you to say.
Even the Am I an A-hole segment.
That's
is
Margery's favorite segment. Okay. What's up, Lynn? We're glad you called. What's up?
I have a tiny cat that has the CH virus, which is cerebellum hypoplasia, and he falls down when he walks and can't always pee very well in the litter box, but he is the sweetest little long-haired cat. He is a love, and everybody adores him when they come in the house. But I do have to make sure they know what he has so they don't get upset because it doesn't go over well. And
good for you.
The poor little thing, he falls all the time, and it took me a long time not to cry every time it happened.
But it's so great that you have him.
I'm with Andrea on this. It is great. It's great.
He is the most wonderful cat, and he's so resilient. And I just want to throw in one quick thing.
Please.
I know you have to end.
No, it's okay.
I lived in West Roxbury when I was a little kid, and the busing hit.
Yep.
And that actually changed our whole family. We had to up and leave with my dad being the only income in the house, a stay-at-home mom like a lot of us had. And they had that two-family house with plans for the future. And when this happened, they begged, borrowed, and stole just to get us out of the city. And ended up with a mortgage for 2 mortgages for over a year. And I don't know how they did it. I don't think they know how they did it. But I have so much respect for that.
Lynn, thank you for sharing that. And by the way, what's the name of the that documentary again where we
Never
featured
Cried.
Never Cry? Go to our YouTube page. It's 23 minutes long, but I'll tell you, it really nails it in 23 minutes. And it's 2 sisters and a daughter of one of the sisters and a grandson. And it really, I think, perfectly captures.
And it's unexplored trauma. It's unexplored, and there's a lot
yeah.
of people from different backgrounds that had that trauma issue.
Okay, unfortunately, lines are full, but we are out of time. So we're with you, baby animal lovers, but not right now.
Thank you all for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. If you tune in on Monday, we'll speak with Congressman Seth Moulton, the Ground Truth Project's Charlie Sennett, NYU medical ethicist Arthur Kaplan, and the Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price III. Actually, I'll be here on Monday.
You will, yep.
Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Connolly, Nicole Garcia, and Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John LeClaw Parker, and our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Kevin Pace Jr., Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, and Patrick Lally. Thanks also to our hosts at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. Stay tuned to the Culture Show's Week in Review. They're coming live from the BPL studio starting right at 2 o'clock here on 89.7 GBH.
Andrew, you were great. See you Monday. And we're ending the show a little early today so we can play some new terrific music. Boston singer-songwriter Frank Graham has a new single out tomorrow, and it's called Boston. There's going to be a show tomorrow at the Lizard Lounge in Cambridge at 9 p.m. to celebrate the release. She'll be on our show with her band in November to perform, but to celebrate our city and this song, we wanted to play a snippet to close out the week. Here is now Frank Graham's band.
Next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Boston Speakers Series, 7 evenings at Symphony Hall, featuring Supreme Court correspondent Nina Totenberg, historian Annette Gordon-Reed, and composer Andrew Lloyd Webber. Information at bostonspeakers.org. Looking for some tender love and lawn care? Get some classic gardening tips from the original Victory Garden series and stream full episodes on the GBH YouTube channel whenever you want.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. First up, we remember actor Dame Maggie Smith, who has died at age 89. A legend of the British stage, she also won Oscars, Tonys, and Golden Globes. She enchanted new generations by way of Harry Potter. And then, of course, she was the Dowager Countess from Downton Abbey everyone wanted to sit next to for her delicious courses of wit. From there, it's a new narrative for the video game The Legend of Zelda. It's the princess who's now doing the saving. Then Project Skydrop, which sounds like a quest you'd find in The Legend of Zelda. Superstar video game designers have invented a real-life event, a treasure hunt that has sent people scouring the woods of New England for golden treasure. And Saturday Night Live turns 50. Now old enough to have an AARP membership, does it still have its edge and cultural relevance? That and more next on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Federal authorities have charged 3 Iranian nationals with targeting members of former President Donald Trump's presidential campaign in a cybersecurity scheme. An unsealed indictment states the alleged hackers are members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Prosecutors say the 3 defendants used social engineering and spear phishing techniques to compromise the accounts of former and current government officials, journalists, people linked to the political campaigns, and others. Huge explosions have rocked Lebanon's capital city. NPR's Ada Peralta reports Israel says it was targeting the headquarters of Hezbollah.
The explosion shook buildings in downtown Beirut. Plumes of black smoke could be seen for miles, and television showed smoldering rubble surrounded by residential buildings. For the past week, Israel has carried out scores of airstrikes in Lebanon, killing nearly 700 people, according to Lebanon's health ministry. This attack, which hit a southern suburb of Beirut, is the closest an Israeli strike has come to the country's capital city. In a statement, the Israeli military said it had conducted an operation on the central headquarters of Hezbollah, but it said it was, quote, intentionally built under residential buildings. This week, the U.S. called for a ceasefire, saying a regional escalation of the conflict is unacceptable. But Israel and Hezbollah have continued to trade fire. Ada Peralta, NPR News, Beirut.
Flash floods and tornadoes are a threat in parts of Georgia, the Carolinas, and southern Virginia because of Helen. The storm that roared ashore on the Florida Gulf Coast as a Cat 4 has weakened, but as a tropical storm, it's producing enormous amounts of rain, 6 to 12 inches, as much as 20 inches in isolated areas. The death toll has risen to at least 22 in 4 states. Here's North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper.
The priority now is saving lives. Helene is causing life-threatening flash flooding, numerous landslides, and downed trees, causing power outages.
Millions of people in multiple states lost power after Helene made landfall. Karen Czar with member station WUKY has the latest on how the state of Kentucky is faring.
The storm has brought heavy rain to Kentucky since Thursday night, and wind gusts have hit 65 miles per hour. Some school districts are closed today, and Governor Andy Beshear sent state employees home for the day. Marianne Hale works for the tourism department in Frankfort.
It's very helpful, especially with the kids off school, to be able to be home.
More than 100,000 Kentuckians are without power, and that number continues to grow. Our radio station, located in Lexington, has switched to auxiliary power several times today, and severe weather warnings remain in effect for much of the state. For NPR News, I'm Karen Czar in Lexington.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 217 points at 42,391. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. GBH is paying tribute today to Dame Maggie Smith, who died at age 89. The British actress appeared in many PBS dramas over the years, including the memorable role of Dowager Countess on Masterpieces' Downton Abbey. Smith had won every major film award before 2010, when she appeared in the first of 6 seasons of Downton Abbey. She herself said it was the role of the sharp-tongued widow that made her a true megastar. In a statement, GBH President Susan Goldberg says, "We join with fans everywhere in celebrating Smith's life and remarkable work that she shared with the world." And as GBH said on X, "We lost an icon today. Rest in peace, Dowager Countess." Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, is on Nantucket this weekend to participate in the annual Nantucket Project event. The Current reports that Hunter was on the island last November with the Biden family for its annual visit during the Thanksgiving holiday. 54-year-old son of the president arrived on Nantucket from Boston on Wednesday aboard a Cape airplane along with his family, Secret Service agents, and Mass State Police troopers. He recently pleaded guilty in a federal tax evasion case and in June was found guilty of firearms-related charges. Hunter Biden is scheduled for sentencing hearings in both cases in December. He faces up to 17 years in prison. Red Sox wrap up the season this weekend with a series against the Rays at Fenway. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Krakow Wittgen Gallery, exhibiting early works in 2 and 3 dimensions by Saul LeWitt. On view now at 10 Newberry Street. You can explore this and other contemporary art at KrakowWittgenGallery.com. And Babson College. You can learn to lead with impact and become a driving force for change. Babson's graduate virtual open house is on October 9th. Registration at babson.edu/gradopenhouse.
Welcome to the Culture Show, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. She's the artistic and executive director of the Roxbury International Film Festival and program manager at Mass Cultural Council. It's time for our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Here's what it sounded like.
Breaking news, Dame Maggie Smith has passed away at age 89. The famed British actress is best known for her roles in Sister Act, Harry Potter, and Downton Abbey.
Oh, don't worry. There are plenty of hours in the day. And, of course, I'll have the weekend.
We'll discuss this later. We mustn't bore the ladies.
What is a weekend?
A treasure hunt is happening right now in the dense forests of Massachusetts to find a prize worth more than $50,000.
It's the Legend of Zelda, and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad. Yeah, go Link. Yeah, get some. Awesome.
A new California law finally requires one-click subscription service cancellations. And this is a move praised by consumer advocates, and it makes streaming services and gyms and other places like that very, very angry.
And it is time to talk to big Oscar contenders that premiered at the first 3 fall festivals, Venice, Telluride, and Toronto.
Here we are, SNL Season 50.
What show is this? It's NBC Saturday Night. It's my favorite show.
50 years of laughs.
You must stop the movie.
50 years of memories.
Well, as you just heard, legendary actress Dame Maggie Smith has died. She was a star on the stage and screen with ties to GBH by way of Masterpieces' Downton Abbey. We'll reflect on her legacy. Then it's the Hunt for Gold October, a real-life treasure hunt as people scouring the woods of New England for a valuable gold statue. Speaking of escapades, Nintendo is out with The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, and it's now the princess who's doing the rescuing. Plus, California gives new meaning to cancel culture with its new click-to-cancel cancel law. Watch out, Netflix. It'll now be easy to end a subscription, as easy as it was to sign up for one. And at 50 years, does Saturday Night Live still live as a cultural touchstone? But first, actor Dame Maggie Smith, we learned this morning that the legend of stage and screen, whose expansive career touched so many generations, from the prime of Miss Jean Brodie to Harry Potter to Downton Abbey, has died at age 89. She had a mountain of awards, BAFTAs, Oscars, Tonys, Golden Globes. But then her role as the Dowager Countess Violet Crawley in Masterpiece's Downton Abbey made her a pop culture icon. She stole every scene, if not with her biting bon mot, then with her withering sideways glances. Joining us to talk about Maggie Smith is Rebecca Eaton, executive producer at large of Masterpiece. It was Rebecca Eaton who was one of the early Downton producers and responsible for bringing it to the United States. Rebecca Eaton, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Jared.
Well, this is a really hard one to believe. I think I would put her in the same category as the Queen, that you just don't expect this to happen.
No.
I think because of because of the strength that she projected on screen and off screen, as we saw in interviews. Who is the Maggie Smith that you recall?
Oh, well, I recall her from when she was 30. I think she was 36 years old, because I saw her in London on the stage. She was playing in a comedy called The Beau's Stratagem. Nobody ever sees that anymore. She was 36 years old. I think I was 23. I don't think I actually saw her. I was sitting so far back and so high up in the cheap seats. But seeing her made me think, oh, I think I want to do something that brings me a little closer to people like this, even though there was nobody like this. And by the way, you say, like the Queen dying. I have been all day getting condolence notes from people saying to me, I'm sorry for your looks, because she was so connected to Masterpiece through them.
And how do you describe what, as you saw her up close and then had the opportunity to work with her and see the rest of the rise of her career, the expansion of her career, what she was in terms of her theatrical presence and stage presence in British culture?
Well, the thing about Maggie, first of all, she's one of the generation of acting royalty, and we're beginning to lose them. We lost Glenda Jackson, we lost Diana Rigg, and thank God, Judi Dench is still treading the boards. But like a lot of them, she was not posh. Maggie Smith was not a posh person. She was middle class. And she became an actress very young. She didn't go to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. She started working, yes, eventually she was at the Old Vic and the National Theatre. But she was firmly on the ground. She was never believing anything about this superstardom. In fact, she used to say, and I think it's true, that she never watched Downton Abbey. She never watched it. It was incredible. It was a job. I think that's, what made her able to keep her incredible magic, and I think her magic was, like a lot of these actors, she had a priceless combination of brains. She was a very, very bright woman, wit, as a lot of the Brits do, and timing. I think she had better timing than any of the rest of those actors, because she could do comedy and then she could do complete seriousness, as she did in so many of the things, including the scene with Mary in Downton Abbey when she convinces Mary to stay alive. She says, choose life. She sits on the bed with Mary after her husband dies.
Well, I know a lot of people are going to be wanting to watch Downton this weekend to be reacquainted, revisit Maggie Smith. Yeah. But for people who also want to plunge into her films, if they're to choose one to watch this weekend, what's your favorite?
Oh, God. Easy. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Because, I was a young woman. I didn't go to a girls' school, but I went to a school with teachers like Miss Jean Brodie and her gals, however she said that in her Scottish accent. She was tough. She was trying to fashion these women. There's a darker side to it, but she was trying to fashion these women to be strong women, and it spoke to me as a young person. I have to just say, Maggie Smith was on Masterpiece more than once. She was in 4 Masterpiece shows. And everybody should go find them and look at them quickly. She was in my other favorite, Maggie Smith, which was called Bed Among the Lentils. And the reason it's my favorite is because it's a monologue written by Alan Bennett. So this is Maggie with nobody acting against or with. She was telling a story. She was being a vicar's wife, and I won't tell you what happens, but go find Bed Among the Lentils by Maggie Smith. It was my favorite. It is my favorite among my top 3 masterpieces ever. And she also did All the King's Men, which is about the Sandringham Battalion that was lost at Gallipoli. She played Queen Mary. That was on Masterpiece. And then, of course, David Copperfield with Daniel Radcliffe.
That's right, the young Harry Potter.
Yes, she kind of discovered him. I mean, arguably, a lot of people discovered him, but when it came time to cast Harry Potter, she had worked with him, and she spoke to the producers and said, have a look at this boy.
Well, Rebecca Eden, thank you for making the time for us today, and we offer our condolences to you as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Jared.
Rebecca Eden is executive producer at large of Masterpiece, and again, we thank her for her time. So we'll bring back in Edgar and Lisa to talk about this major, major loss. And I think what's interesting about Dame Maggie Smith is that people have all of these different entry points. I had the great fortune of seeing her on the stage once in London in a play called Breath of Life by David Hare, in which she starred with Judi Dench, which was a pretty incredible piece. And this was before the fame really came with Harry Potter and Downton Abbey. But how are you both thinking back on her career today?
I mean, incredible, right? I mean, when you think about Judi Dench and Vanessa Redgrave, she comes, from that era of these incredibly gifted actors who were just so natural, right, on the stage and on film. And it's true. I mean, I feel like you don't find that. I mean, it's really hard to find that now, but I also find it in British actors more. But I think it's funny because it's true. She never wanted to be this like big person, and she said darn to Downton Abbey because I used to be able to go to the store and I used to be able to go all these places, and now I can't go anywhere because this show. And then with Harry Potter, she said, I mean, that was really important to me because it was my pension.
Which is hilarious.
which is hilarious, but that's who she was, right? That's who she was. She was very clean. Who she was who she appeared to be when she came to see us.
Also,
so I think
when you think about her skill level, like you read the New York Times obit, very casually, here's a line. Although television was a relatively small part of her resume, she won 4 Emmys.
and an Oscar for the prime of Miss.
True,
I mean, it's just like unbelievable talent. And Jared, as you point out, and hearing Rebecca talk about this, I'm reminded again about the embarrassment of riches that the acting world is over across the pond in England, right? The fact that somebody of this stature, of this skill, who we see on the silver screen or we see in these incredible television shows, is also day in and day out working in live theater, and it's accessible, and people can go see them doing their craft in the theater in a live environment, which they're is just incredible to me.
Well, to give people more of a sense of Dame Maggie Smith, we'll go back to Rebecca Eden's favorite of her films. This is from the 1969 film The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, in which Miss Smith portrayed the titular character, a teacher at an all-girls school in Scotland. She won the Academy Award, Lisa, as you just mentioned, for Best Actress, and the BAFTA for her portrayal.
I will not stand quietly by and allow myself to be crucified by a woman whose fetid frustration has overcome her judgment. If scandal is to your taste, Miss Mackay, I shall give you a feast. Miss Brodie, I am a teacher. I am a teacher first, last, always. Do you imagine that for one instant I will let that be taken from me without a fight? I have dedicated, sacrificed my life to this profession, and I will not stand by like an inky little slacker and watch you rob me of it. And for what? For what reason? For jealousy. Because I have the gift of claiming girls for my own. It is true, I am a strong influence on my girls. I am proud of it.
She's somebody who, of course, worked with Laurence Olivier, who, by the way, pulled her into the National Theater when he saw her as a young actor. She worked with Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, Ingmar Bergman, Betty Davis. It goes on and on and on.
But what I love when you say about Richard Burton is that he remarked that Smith just didn't take over a scene in the VIPs with him. She committed grand larceny. That's one of the things that people used to say about her. She would just come in and take over.
Yeah.
Because just listen to that. She was such an incredibly forceful actor. And I love, she also said, it's true, I don't tolerate fools, but then they don't tolerate me. So I am spiky, she said. That's what I loved about it.
In addition to being a profession, it was sport, kind of, the way she seemed to describe it.
And also, she's one of these people who talks about the fact that, like, I think she has a quote that's something like, I didn't particularly want to be an actor. I just couldn't help it. I couldn't stop myself from doing it. It was like such a calling for her that this is the only thing that she could do in a way. And she also talks about herself as a very shy person and introverted. And that it was in inhibiting these characters that she was able to connect with who she is.
Exactly.
And then end up at this arc with Downton Abbey. Of course, she made a couple of other films during that. Many films, actually, not just a couple.
Let's not forget Sister Act.
That's right.
That's right.
As the Mother Superior.
I was going to say, you could see this strength of her characters building into this one character. So let's return to Downton Abbey once more for a scene where the family is in the dining room and a newcomer, Matthew Crawley, a lawyer from Manchester, is discussing something foreign to everyone else, that would be having a day job. And this is where Maggie Smith, as again the Dowager Countess, manages to sum up the gaping class divide in just 4 now immortal words.
What will you do with your time?
I've got a job in Ripon. I said I'll start tomorrow.
A job?
In a partnership. You might have heard of it, Harvland Carter. They need someone who understands industrial law, I'm glad to say, although I'm afraid most of it will be wills and conveyancing.
You do know I mean to involve you in the running of the estate.
Oh, don't worry. There are plenty of hours in the day. And, of course, I'll have the weekend.
We'll discuss this later. We mustn't bore the ladies.
What is a weekend?
One could argue that just secured the success of that series right there in those 4 words.
And one of the things that's most impressive is that in that character, and in a lot of characters she plays, right? She is sharp, she can be tough, but you don't think of her as mean. To play that, it's razor thin. That tone is razor thin to be able to hit that, and somehow she does, because she's beloved, right? You beloved her.
And I just want to leave people with one more film, which is not a typical one. In 2018, there was a film called Tea with the Dames.
Oh, yes, because they were all dames.
They were all dames. Maggie Smith, Joan Plowright, Eileen Atkins, and Judi Dench literally having tea. First they start outdoors, then they move inside because it starts raining. And these women are discussing their lives, relationships, careers, and it is riveting. So check that out too.
Excellent, yes.
Well, coming up, how 2-star video game designers have people in real life scouring the woods of New England for buried treasure. That and more is next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Now playing on the GBH News YouTube channel.
This morning they were waiting for the blacks who arrived at South Boston High.
Never cried. Boston's busing legacy.
You don't think about tomorrow, you just think about today when you get in there, get on that bus, get off that bus, get in that school. Then I'm going through today. Thank God I got out. I'm going home. And then the next day.
Watch on youtube.com/GBH News.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Trinity Rep, presenting Ms. Holmes and Ms. Watson, Apartment 2B, a murder mystery comedy running October 3rd through November 17th. You can get your tickets at trinityrep.com. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, Massachusetts Red Cross volunteers head down to Florida to help with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Offshore wind farms could be harming endangered white whales. And Springfield, Ohio had an overwhelming month after Donald Trump made false statements about Haitian migrants there. This week he focused on Charlevoix, Pennsylvania. We'll hear how that small town is responding. That's coming up at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-host Edgar P. Kerhork III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, and there's a get-rich-quick-ish scheme underway right now. Adventurous treasure hunters are going for the gold in a search for treasure in the woods of New England. We all decided this week, as we saw this story, this is a great culture story. Just people coming together, actually moving apart as they scan the woods. Now we believe it's Western Massachusetts, Connecticut, a little tiny bit of New Hampshire, a little tiny bit of Vermont, because...
That's a large area.
75 miles is the diameter of the circle that is currly in play.
Well, I know what I'm doing this weekend.
So you're going to be hunting for this trophy. So
are you going hunting
it's a
treasure?
$25,000 gold statue.
Yes.
Which is shiny, so you should be able to find it in the middle of the forest, no problem. But then, not only that, you get half of the proceeds of the entry fees. So I mean, I think
when I checked this morning, it was $46,000.
It's now at $50,000, and it just went up to $50,790. So every time somebody signs up in real time, they are updating that number on the website.
So let me just back up and explain
what's happening.
So this is Jason Rohr, who's been making video games for a while, and he has, with a collaborator, created this treasure hunt. We haven't had a major treasure hunt of this scale in a long time, and it just happens to be here in New England. He is a New Englander, and so he has created this website. You can buy into it so anybody can hunt for this, but if you buy into it with this $20 entry fee, thus raising the bounty, then you can get pictures that might give you a clue if you can chart the patterns of cloud cover or rainfall or where the porcupines roam to figure out where this is. And obviously people are very excited about it.
Yeah, it's super exciting. It's also like right in line. So this guy's been making games for some time.
A long time.
Usually not necessarily happening in real life like this one is. But there's something about his work that reminds me a little bit of Christopher Nolan in that he seems to like to play with the notion of time, right? One of his games, like the whole premise is like you could never beat it if you had infinite time. Another is, I think, buried somewhere in Nevada or something like that, and is meant to be played generations in the future.
2,000 years.
Yeah.
2,000 years in the future.
So he has this funny thing with time, and he's doing something clever with this, which is he said, all right, we're going to put a finite amount of time. We're going to start in the beginning. It's almost impossible to solve. At the end, it is going to be 100% possible to solve. And there's this little puzzle that's happening in the course of time, 2 weeks in this case. So each day, those who are participating get another picture. The pictures are starting very close to the ground. So the first picture is just literally the ground, so you don't know where it is.
But so many people are actually taking that little picture and going, okay, this is what the moss looks like, and where's the sun going? Yeah.
But each day it gets further and further away from the ground, so you get more information, while the radius is shrinking. It's just very Christopher Nolan, right? Time's going one way at the end, it's going the other way at the front. It's so clever, it's so cool.
I mean, they say that he is the world's most interesting video game designer. A lot of his games, his family, and people they're so esoteric that you can't really play them, or they're hard to play. So he really wanted to create something that was all for the whole family, and people could go out hiking. And it's it's sort of like the geocaching, right? It's sort of like Pokemon Go. It's sort of like on those things about like getting people outside, but not as dangerous, I think, as Pokemon Go. People were falling off of cliffs, I think. And then what's interesting too is the Boston Book Festival used to do something like this. They would do a treasure hunt coming up to their book festival. That they would hide books all over, and you'd have to find them, and then you'd get the page. And so I just think it's a really incredible way and really smart way to do this.
Well, and it turns out that these are historically really hard.
Yeah.
So there's another treasure hunt that happened a few years ago. I think it started in the 1990s,
Oh, yes.
and it ended up with actually one of the pieces was found right here in Massachusetts. The weird thing is, it's a park I run by all the time
Really?
in Boston in the North End. So which makes you
could've been
realize,
you.
I know we have no idea what's happening beneath us, around us, what's hidden in trees, what's hidden in the ground. In this case, what's hidden beneath home base. But this is a person who left 12 treasures. Only 3 of them have been found still. So the
and he's dead.
And
he died in a car
This
accident
is in New Mexico,
in like
right? Yeah.
2005,
So we'll have
right?
never.
So,
You're just going to come upon them, which I think is kind of cool as well.
And before that, the other big one led 5 people to their deaths.
Yes.
So that's why this one is a little safer. But I also look at this moment, and of course, the world we're in, I find something heartening about it that I guess maybe you can argue that greed is at the heart of it if people want to find this. Of course,
No,
everybody
let's
could
not
use
say
some
that.
money.
Let's say it's family out time,
Right.
outside time, people spending time together.
And
That's really what he
yeah.
wants. But I mean, I think that he's like, there needs to be a carrot in order for you to
Yeah,
do that. But
yeah,
it's fun.
absolutely.
Add adventure and fun.
I was
to
going to
it.
say the adventure piece, I think,
Yeah.
is just as compelling as any other piece of this. I mean, yes, the carrot, the money's cool. It's going to be, what, $50,000, $75,000? That's a not insignificant amount of money. But the adventure of this is just so great. It's interesting. The guy who found that treasure in Boston a couple years ago, he said this is a genre that has been underexploited through the years,
Yes.
and I kind of agree with that. I'm surprised
doing
there
it.
are not more of these. Fingers crossed that people continue to hear about this, that this gets a lot of attention, and there are more of these put out there. Because who doesn't love the
I
idea
think
of a
that's true.
treasure
Have you ever
hunt,
done
a
the
real
Have
one?
you ever done the geocaching?
I did a story on it years ago, actually.
It's fun. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done that before. I've actually gone into the woods. My nephew got us all together to go in and do that and find it. And when
Yeah.
you find it, you're like, oh my gosh, I found it. I mean, it's
Totally.
a great thing to do collaboratively together, and I think it does bring people together. But what I did want to say about the geocaching, now over 361,000 geocache owners there are, and it was translated into 24 languages. It is a really big genre, big events. I mean, I think
It's a
that
subculture. It's a
a
world.
subculture that we don't. That even you can even keep doing geocaching when this goes away.
Did we just find the treasure?
Well, speaking of adventure,
That was a nice little lead-in.
next is it a remix or a revolution? Because Nintendo is out with The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, giving the princess an adventure of her own. So, yes, we implore people to go outside and hunt for that
Yes.
treasure chest in Western Massachusetts or Connecticut or New Hampshire or Vermont. Or maybe after you've spent all your quality time
you're
outdoors,
tired.
it is a beautiful weekend,
Yep.
it seems. You can come inside and play the new Legend of Zelda game, which I remember when it first came out. And I played this game. I actually played it with my
Zelda,
mom.
I really like the early work myself.
But this, for people who don't know, Link was the protagonist in this game, and he was off to rescue
Always the hero.
the princess Zelda. There's often jokes about this. The parents got confused, and they thought Zelda was the longtime warrior protagonist. Well, now she actually is.
Yes.
It took all this time, nearly 40 years, to turn this around and put her at the forefront of the game.
Yeah, this is really cool. I mean, I think that this is a great idea. It's kind of right in line with the time. Also, I find it remarkable the way that Zelda is one example, Mario's another. These franchises, which have now been around for decades, have sort of continued to be able to reinvent themselves to like have a world that is itself, that is unto itself, but they keep finding different ways to explore and to present this world,
Yeah.
and it's a really cool thing.
Well, I think it's also with the times. It's like coming up with the times. I wrote finally, Zelda again, the year of women. I think this is going to be the year of women, because you're right. In 1991, 98, 2002, 2006, she was always sort of like just about to be that hero, but then she always is getting saved, right? She's always getting saved, and so now we have this. She gets this. Magical wand that creates echoes and objects and monsters that allow her to do puzzles and defeat the enemies, and she is the hero. And so I think that's really exciting. I think it's exciting for young girls who are gamers and are gaming too to be able to identify and have this character. who is doing these amazing
And
things.
it's pretty striking to me that it took this long.
I know. Well, it's probably a male-dominated field.
Yeah, but that's probably true. I don't know a lot about the video gaming industry and who's running things, but yeah, as you say, there were iterations leading up to this until now. But they never gave her full-fledged due. And of course, there is some backlash where critics are saying this is part of the quote-unquote woke agenda to make her the protagonist, but they'll get over it.
Yeah, and there hasn't been a ton. I mean, I think this also, at least me sort of looking, and I, by no means am I an expert in this field, but as somebody who kind of consumes the media, I think that there's a little bit less pushback at this right now than maybe there would have been 5 years ago that we've seen in some of the other things. So in some ways, maybe that marks a little bit of progress.
And maybe it's going to push other gamers forward to be
also,
I
got to say, Shigeru Miyamoto, who's the person who kind of created Zelda, right, is also the person who created essentially Donkey Kong and Mario. So when you want to talk about influential people in the last 50 years, you're kind of be hard-pressed to find somebody be more influential than that when you really think about how many people's lives his work has touched.
And this is maybe part of his legacy.
And here's a little trivia for you, by the way. Here's a commercial for The Legend of Zelda of previous iteration where Robin Williams talks to his daughter, who is named after Zelda.
The first time I saw you, I knew we'd be linked forever. For you, I traveled to the four corners of the world. I faced adversity. I became a hero.
Dad.
I saved your kingdom.
Dad.
Yes, Zelda?
Are you mixing me up with the princess again?
Hard to say. You're both pretty magical.
That's sweet. I had always known his daughter was Zelda. I didn't realize ever until this.
I didn't either when we just talked about it before.
That this was from the game. Well, next, if you live in California, calling it quits just got easier because this week, Governor Gavin Newsom signed the Click to Cancel law, requiring companies to make it as easy to cancel a subscription as it is to sign up for one. So yes, we're broadcasting from Massachusetts where we do not have this law. However, I think it's fitting that we're talking about it this week because we three have in the past talked about the need for Movie Butler to guide us through all of the movie offerings, how you can download them, where you can download them, and I would add this to it. Thank you, Gavin Newsom and the other people in California, because we know that we have all been overloaded with subscriptions. We lose track, and then because it's just easier to pay the money than it is to cancel them because they make it so arduous, people are paying a lot of money for these subscriptions until now in California.
That's exactly. I mean, how many subscriptions that I have that are connected to a credit card that you don't even know, and every month it just keeps coming back. And so I think that this is an incredible law. I think it's like with all the other things that are going on in the world that you don't have control over. Now we have control. Now we have some control. He's giving back some control, and although it might be small, I think it's in a lot of people's minds. It's a big thing.
Yeah, and I mean, this seems like. This seems like an actual good law, right? The whole premise behind this is basically, if it's easy enough to make one click to subscribe, it needs to be easy enough to desubscribe with that same one click, right? If it's going to be easy to get in, it's got to be easy to get out. I found myself going who could possibly be against this, right? So I look up in California, and their Senate and their Assembly, and how the vote went in order to pass this. Unanimous, essentially across the board. There was it was unanimous out of committee. It was unanimous in their version of the House, which is the Assembly. And I think in the Senate, or I might have this backwards, only one person in the entirety, one lawmaker in California voted against this. So everybody in California is in favor.
Because it affects everyone.
Well, I mean, talk about being on the right side of an issue. This apparently they're on the right side of this issue.
And I think it's interesting that this all started because of Adobe. Right? It was like the Adobe subscriptions that you couldn't get out of, and you'd have to call, and then you'd have to write, and then you'd have to email, and then you have to find something, and you couldn't. And it was sort of what am I going to do? So I think that this,
Well, there was a 2022 study that showed that the average person is paying $219 a month. And again, this is 2 years ago. I would argue that it's way more now because obviously businesses have figured out that this is a very lucrative model because they know people forget. But 2 years ago, it was $219 a month. But if you ask people how much they were paying, ultimately it was $133 more than they realize. So everybody who's listening right now is part of that. Surely you don't realize
absolutely,
everything.
Especially with all the streaming services and everything that you have. You're totally, I'm going to subscribe to that. So it's true. It's probably close to $500 a month.
And everything's on a different rhythm, right? So some stuff renews every 2 months. Sometimes it's once a month. Sometimes it's once a year. And you get that notification in your email, and you're like, I forgot, right? And then you just quickly log in, and it's kind of a pain to get out, and then you're like, I'll do it later.
Exactly.
And then you don't.
And it's like gym memberships are the same way. Like all these sort of memberships and subscriptions. It's like, I forgot to do that. I forgot to be able to do that. Can I just go in and cancel? No. You have to wait another month, and then you have to call so-and-so and write a letter and do everything. So
it's very unfortunate that an Amazon Prime van just pulled up in front of the library because that just jogged my memory that there had been a lawsuit against Amazon actually for making it so difficult. So that is part of the law, that it has to be one click or an easy 1-800 toll-free number to call. But the reason we can bring it home and talk about this a little bit more is because the FTC is also thinking about this. So California was first out of the gate, but this could become something federally mandated.
And if it was unanimous, I'm sure that it's going to be easier for other places to do it.
And of course, it's worth noting, if you look again across the pond to the European Union, they've been way ahead of us on this, and they're, it's already much easier to get out of subscriptions there, and has been for a couple of years. So we're catching up, but let's keep going.
Yeah.
So we put Movie Butler out into the world, and look.
And we'll have we need subscriptions.
Pays returns. Yeah, we'll have our own. All right. Well, coming up, Saturday Night Live at 50. Does it still have its finger on the pulse of American culture? At 50, does it still have a pulse? Ouch. We will discuss. That's coming up next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
When the news matters.
State health officials are warning that the Stewart healthcare situation remains volatile and complex.
GBH News sticks with the story.
There will be additional bumps in the road, even as we move closer and closer toward the resolution of this very difficult situation.
Continued coverage and in-depth analysis at your fingertips.
The status of Norwood Hospital is also unclear.
GBH News 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Sullivan Tire and Auto Service, committed to serving New England for over 69 years, with over 100 locations across New England. From oil changes to computer diagnostics, their technicians can maintain your vehicle. SullivanTire.com. And Furniture Consignment Gallery. Shoppers can view their pre-owned inventory in their showrooms in Burlington, Natick, Hanover, and Plymouth. Committed to the circular economy for over 30 years. More at FurnitureConsignment.com.
The Israeli military has been targeting Hezbollah, killing heads of the group with pager attacks and airstrikes in Lebanon. Hezbollah might not be the same without those leaders.
The first-class commanders who were killed have been there from the very, very beginning.
The uncertain future of Hezbollah, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. I just want to add, people everywhere are talking about Maggie Smith, Marianne Leone, who we recently had on the show about her book. She's married to the Academy Award-winning actor Chris Cooper, who starred with her in My House in Umbria, and they just have the loveliest things to say about that experience filming in Italy with her and what that meant to them as well. So again, we continue to remember Maggie Smith. Well, if you're just tuning in, as I mentioned, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, and we're going to talk about the film festivals, and speaking of movies, the influence they have on the Oscars, because this is the exciting time of year. Sometimes, like with Silence of the Lambs, we see a big Oscar contender sneak out in the beginning of the year. I think that came out in February or March. But most of the Oscar-winning films end up coming out this time of the year. Lisa Simmons, you know an especially large amount about this. So to what degree are we starting to find this coming from the film festivals? Are they dictating what become Oscar contenders now?
Well, I mean, they traditionally, yes, they have been. I mean, these are the big festivals, right? Venice, Telluride, Toronto, and New York, I think, starts tonight. And I think that, yes, over the course of the last 10, 15 years, we have definitely seen that these festivals play a huge role in Best Picture nominations, actor nominations, because you want to bring your film to a place where you're going to get all of this audience and you're going to really hear what people feel and people say. I mean, we were talking about Venice, or you guys were, about the clapping and what does that really mean? And even though it seems ridiculous,
it is ridiculous.
It
is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but and maybe it doesn't play a huge role. But those are the types of things where distributors and others and studios are looking for the buzz. They're looking for what people are saying. They're sending critics to these places, and we're going to talk a little bit about Ty Burr's article, which I thought was great because it really talks a lot about why these festivals are so important. And you're right. There's sometimes the ones that come out in February and March. Sundance plays a role, but more plays a role about, people talk about Sundance and Cannes sort of like being the competition, and then coming into the fall season, it's really the draft, right? Because this is where we're really starting to see these films that are popping up, and so I mean, it's exciting. I mean, it's so far away, the Oscars, but really this is where it starts.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself, and I wonder, I have to imagine that if we're seeing at all a change in the kind of influence that these festivals are having, I think it must, or I suspect it must relate to the fractured media landscape that we're in, right? I have lost the thread on what movie comes out in what year. You know what I mean? Because the movies no longer necessarily even happen at the theater. People don't watch television, so you don't see commercials for upcoming films. You don't see them come in and out of the theater the way you used to. There's not a lot. I mean, people don't really read newspapers or film critics in newspapers, right? We're getting our information from so many places.
Social media and
movies
streaming,
are coming
yes.
out in so many different ways that I feel like increasingly you're going, well, who knows about this? Where can I get good... a film festival. That's people who love films, who know films. They know what they're talking about. It gives this ring of authenticity in a world where you're like, I don't know where to turn for good information.
And I wonder if this makes it more democratic now, because usually at this time of year, you already start to have a sense, okay, this is going to be the big Best Picture nominee. This person has a lock on Best Actress this year. This is going to be her year. And we don't necessarily have that this year. There are a bunch of names for a bunch of films being bandied about, and we can talk about a couple of them that seem to be getting attention, but there's no clear frontrunner. And so you look at these festivals and you think, well, they have a larger hand. There are more voices now behind this.
Yes, exactly. We don't have Barbie. We don't have Oppenheimer, which was really the big last year, right? So we're going into the year 2 where there was the writer's strike. So now I think that the festivals make so much more sense that there weren't a lot of releases in the theater. So I did come across this Reddit article. It was in 2022, but I just want to share some results. So this person wanted to look and see about how film festivals really affect the Best Picture nomination, and it was saying so the results of 115 films over 13 years, it was like 2010 to 2022, 51 had screened at TIFF, which is the top predictor of Best Pictures. 29 had screened at New York, 27 had shown at Telluride, 19 at Venice, 16 at Sundance, 15 at Cannes, and 33 of the films didn't get into a film festival screening at all. 26 of them had been in the fall or the winter. So it really does make a difference. These festivals are really making a difference.
So it seems a couple that they are talking about, if we are going to go in that direction, is Ray Fiennes for the Conclave, which is taking a look at the very serious election process for the new pope, which apparently isn't so serious in this storytelling. Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, he's playing an architect coming out of the Holocaust. And a lot of conversation around Angelina Jolie playing Maria Callas.
Right. I mean, and Nicole Kidman. Yep, exactly, playing. But I also think that one of the biggest ones is The Room Next Door, That's Pedro Almodovar's new film, which is really, they're saying, is really solidifying Oscar potential.
And that's with Tilda Swinton and Julianne Moore.
Yes, and that's the one that got the 17-minute standing ovation, I think.
Yeah. 17 minutes?
Yeah,
Nobody claps for 17 minutes.
Oh, my goodness gracious. But I mean, it's exciting. This is an exciting time of year. Fall film festivals are a really exciting time of year. So just keep your eye on the streaming and your eye on social media, because that's really where people are finding out about all of these things.
I was going to say, again, for as somebody who knows from film festivals, what is your recommendation to those of us who can't physically go to these festivals? How is it best to try to connect with what's going on or participate in it in some form or fashion?
I mean, I think following, certain distributors, following certain studios like A24, which is really on, has lately really been on top of a lot of these Best Picture nods, and so I mean, I think that's the way. I mean, you can follow the trades, the Hollywood Reporter and things like that, but I think it's really, as you said, it's not in mainstream media anymore. It's really happening in the social media space, and so you're going to see all of this coming up and what's coming out of TIFF and all of these things that are happening.
Well, let's move to the small screen now. Although it's also making a cameo on the big screen, that would be Saturday Night Live. There is a film about Saturday Night Live being released in theaters.
Yes.
There's a lot of conversation, though, because the 50th season launches this Saturday night. Gene Smart, how much do we love this? Gene Smart is hosting Jelly Roll, fresh off of Boston, I believe, is the musical act. But we decided to take this moment to look at Saturday Night Live from the 50th year, as we talk about the 50th year, and wonder about its resonance today. So here's a montage of some of SNL's most iconic moments of political satire.
Do you have a question for the president?
I took some acid.
Just remember, you're a living organism on this planet, and you're very safe. You've just taken a heavy drug. Now just relax, stay inside, and listen to some music, okay? Yeah. Do you have any Allman Brothers?
Finally, to Saddam Hussein, I have just one more thing to say. Live from, no wait, two more things to say.
I believe that diplomacy should be the cornerstone of any foreign policy.
And I can see Russia from my house.
And Senator Harris, your closing statement.
The Democratic Party needs to stop taking black women for granted. Specifically, one black woman. Me.
So, well, we spent a lot of time laughing. So, yeah, this is, of course, the stars are aligning to have the 50th anniversary season in an election year. We do know that Maya Rudolph is returning to play Kamala Harris. But this is, I wonder, we were just talking about the changing media landscape. What's the place of SNL today?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's really, really hard to say. On the one hand, I look at it and I say, well, here's something, unlike a lot of legacy shows, that in some ways, just by its very nature, is tailor-made for social media, right? They're sketches. They're small little bits that you can chop up and you can distribute shortly after it airs live, and people spend their Sunday and their Monday catching up on what they didn't watch on television. And honestly, I think more and more that's how people are experiencing this show. I mean, I think people, certainly the ratings suggest people do still tune in.
Right.
Not insignificant number, but nowhere near the numbers that used to. But nobody's tuning into television.
Well, because you don't have the options that you used to have. Like you say, like if I miss Saturday Night Live, I know that I can catch it on YouTube. I know that I can go, and someone says, "Oh, wow, did you see the cold open?" And I'm like, "Oh no," exactly. And then I can just go on. But I do think, and there's this whole new thing now where the younger generation is deciding to go to bed early. I mean, I think it's affecting late night also. I think we talked about that before too. It's like 11:30 at night, but I do. I mean, I'm excited for this season. I mean, I think it was really smart to bring Maya Rudolph back. I think people really want to see that. She's great at that, and we all need a little brevity.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on this. One, I think it's kind of meeting the moment in a really good way, actually, because there are little digestible bits in all of the skits, or the weekend update, or the opening monologue. So this is almost tailor-made now for our times and how people want to find this material. I also think that Saturday Night Live is now part of us.
It is.
And we come in and out of its life. It comes in and out of our lives. I remember first watching it in high school when it wasn't we kind of made it the cool thing to do when it was on the wane at that point. We were all watching it, and then I remember pulling out of it in college because you were partying and you weren't home to watch it. And then, for people who have families, you're maybe not staying up late, but then you come back into it when the kids get younger. And so it's really interesting. You also attach the actors from certain generations to your sensibility. So it's kind of fascinating in that way for a show with such longevity.
That's why I'm really looking forward to the movie, right? Because it brings back when I was growing up and those early years of Gilda Radner, and I think that was some of the best Saturday Night Live. But I do think you're right. We're digesting it differently, and I think that's an important way to think about it. And whether it's not on people's radar anymore, I think it is, but you're right. I think it's just on the radar in a different way.
Yeah,
and
the,
can access
the question really remains is is it going to resonate with younger audiences? I mean, right now, as best they can tell, it's really 30 to 44-year-olds who watch it most, right? And that's, I think, probably skewing a little older than it once did. When you talk about Gilda Radner and that first cast, most of them were in their 20s. I mean, she was 30, Chevy Chase was 30, but Bill Murray was like 25, Dan Aykroyd was like 23. Right. So, I don't know that it's skewing as young as it used to.
No.
I don't know that it's as good as it used to be. Let's just say that.
Yes, this is true. And
I think it does too.
And this is probably Lorne Michaels' last year. So
potentially.
Potentially.
And some people think it might be the last year for the show, although that seems unlikely.
Yeah, that seems like sacrilege.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, that, of course, is the sound of our lightning round, which is time to talk about the headlines that caught our attention this week. Edgar, what was yours?
Well, I like this little story out of France where there were some volunteer student archaeologists in a French port town in Normandy, and they're doing a little study in this area which is by a cliff, and it's eroding, so there's not much time left to study it. And these student archaeologist volunteers came across a bottle with a little scroll neatly tucked into the bottle. And they opened it up, and lo and behold, it was a message written in 1825 by another archaeologist who was at that site and had been there and had done some work and left a little note that basically just says that he had been there and he carried out excavations in this area. And they all were just super delighted. Apparently, once this gets officially dated and they make sure that it's true, it will be the oldest message in a bottle ever discovered. 1825 is when it was put down there, and it's more than almost 200 years later that they find it. And there's a great quote from the leader of this archaeological dig who said, sometimes you see these time capsules that are left by builders, but it's rare in archaeology because most archaeologists like to think that they've done all the work that needs to be done on a site, so they don't expect anybody to ever come back. So it's just cool. It's delightful.
Well, this is interesting because this is sort of like doing the game 2,000 years from now.
It's exactly like that.
People are leaving stuff. So
yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Were there any predictions? Were there other overriding messages in the message in the bottle?
The message was really boring. I mean, it was literally this guy
was like,
to your neighbors. No, it was just I was here.
Be kind to your neighbors.
The script is beautiful though. It's handwritten, beautiful script.
Lisa, what was yours?
That Be Kind to Your Neighbors leads me into mine, I found out this story this week, which I loved it. It was about this certain species of octopus that are fishing with other fish. Now they always think that octopus, fish on their own, but apparently there is a species that actually works with other fish to eat.
So
Isn't
nice.
that nice? No,
that is really,
it's not necessarily nice because if those fish get out of hand, the octopus punches them. So you've got to see this video. So an octopus is swimming along, the fish are swimming along with them, they're eating, they're doing whatever. One fish gets a little greedy, comes in here, boom. And then if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, the groupers are sitting back going, okay, where's my food? And then the octopus will come over and be punch them. So, it's amazing. It says, here's a quote, "The ones that get more punched are the main exploiters of the group. These are the ambush predators. The ones that don't move don't look for prey." Says and also they punch fish just to keep the group moving. I thought this was hysterical, but it really is this octopus are this really cultural phenomenon under the sea. If you haven't read read Remarkable Bright Creatures, which is really about octopus, which is amazing, and then My Octopus the Teacher. See those things because they are really incredible creatures.
And very smart.
They're very smart. I always joke that, I'm not actually joking, this is true. I turned My Octopus Teacher off 10 minutes before the end because in my world she's still swimming around.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't trending well when I decided to turn it off. So I thought, I'm just going to keep
I'm going
her
to write
alive.
my own
Well, I
ending
mean,
here.
because
Choose my own adventure.
They do have predators.
Yes, they do. Well, speaking of predators, actually, my headline is
Great segue.
billed as this awful Bridgerton ball where people are paying
credit.
between $150 and $1,000 in Michigan to go to this ballroom where the entertainment was one pole dancer. We're not really sure the connection between pole dancing and Bridgerton, and undercooked food, and that's about it. And that's why you were paying $1,000.
Oh.
And because everybody has a camera, everybody was posting. There weren't even enough chairs, so people were dressed up in their Regency gowns and sitting on the floor, not being able to eat.
Oh my
Because when there
gosh.
was only undercooked, if there wasn't just undercooked food, there was no other food because it was gone within an hour. Yeah,
And they
this
all
is a
looked
party that
lovely,
went
but I
bad.
heard that the pole dancer was there because they had hired someone that worked in the circus, and the only thing she really wanted to do was a pole dance, so they allowed her to put the pole dance in there. I'm going to have to watch Bridgerton again and see whether or not there is a pole dance in there.
Well, I certainly don't remember it. I did watch a lot of it.
There's going to be
me
more
too.
seasons, so stay tuned.
Well, that is all for this edition of The Culture Show. Tune in on Monday for the new director of the Harvard Art Museums, and we'll have a preview of the William Castle Schlock and Awe retrospective at the Coolidge Corner Theater. Edgar, what's coming up on the Curiosity Desk?
Well, we're headlong into our next Curiosity Desk video, which will be coming out, I think, next week. We're going to look at some urban myths in and around the Boston area and find out if they're true.
Sounds great. Thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, and Olivia Corshio. And thanks to the City Table, Lennox Hotel, and the Newsfeed Cafe. I'm Jared Bowen. Pet your octopus and have an art-filled weekend.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
Spend your afternoon with us. Stay with us for GBH's All Things Considered at 4 and Market
of New England. You can drive away in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Outback. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. Tonight on GBH2. From empires to lesser-known stories, actor John Leguizamo highlights Latino and Latina heroes and their contributions throughout history. Catch Voces American Historia, the untold history of Latinos. Tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Classical Radio Boston is WCRB-FM 99.5 HD1 Lowell, Boston, WGBH-FM HD2 Boston, WCAI-FM HD2 Woods Hole, WJMF-FM HD1 Smithfield, Providence, and at classical.org.
We've got Bach's first Brandenburg Concerto. Diego Fasolis leads I Barocchisti.